Chapter 239. Actually, Dharmaraja was well aware that there were actually a lot of experts in the cultivation circle who liked to retire behind the scenes these days. For example, in the secular world, some people were willing to give up all their fame and fortune for the sake of immortality. In the cultivation circle, there were naturally old seniors who envied ordinary people's ordinary lives and planned to live in seclusion in the secular world. These old seniors who lived in seclusion in the secular world generally felt that cultivation was all for naught in the end. Even if they cultivated to be immortal, it didn't mean anything. People would always get tired of living. If there really was someone who was immortal, that would be terrifying. The reason why Dharmaraja admired Father Wang so much was that this senior had completely chosen to blend into the secular world and go to the bottom of society to earn money and live in the secular world. Dharmaraja didn't think he could do this alone. Many cultivators had jobs in the secular world, but most of these jobs were for their peers in the cultivation circle. For example, Dharmaraja used the godly thunder inheritance to repair magic weapons, but he still earned money from cultivators. Father Wang, on the other hand, had managed to do both with just one book. Dharmaraja was especially shaken. Sure enough, a great senior was a great senior. Magic light shone everywhere he went. Dharmaraja respectfully picked up the cup of tea which Grandfather Wang had handed him. When he saw his face reflected in the steaming tea, he instantly fell silent. He knew that when grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had come to visit the Wang family's small villa back then, Grandfather Wang had served him a bowl of tomato egg soup and a broccoli. To this day, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal still hadn't understood the morality behind it. Now this old senior had served him a cup of tea. What on earth was the meaning of this cup of tea? The scene fell silent. Holding the cup of tea, Dharmaraja was silent for a long time, unable to bear to take a sip. He wanted to take this cup of tea back to study it. Dharmaraja sat in the Wang family's small villa until noon. Seeing that Mother Wang was about to come back with groceries, the old man insisted that Dharmaraja stay for lunch. Dharmaraja felt overwhelmed by this old senior's invitation, and didn't dare refuse at all. It wasn't long before Dharmaraja heard movement outside the door. A woman carrying several bags of groceries swiftly opened the door and flew in like a spy before swiftly closing the door behind her. The old man was startled by the noise. What's going on? Wang Ma listened to the movement outside the door, made a shushing gesture and whispered, "Dad, it seems that someone is following me." "Follow you?" Old man Wang frowned. "Yeah." Mother Wang nodded. "It seems like he's been following me for a long time. When I was buying groceries, I felt like a pair of eyes was staring at me." At this point, Mother Wang turned her gaze to Dharmaraja. "Who are you?" "I'm here on Senior Ling's orders to deliver the repaired spirit sword. It's a pleasure to meet you, Senior. Please advise me." Dharmaraja bowed deeply to Mother Wang. Mother Wang suddenly understood. "So you're Dharmaraja. Ling mentioned you before." Dharmaraja was so moved that a thin layer of mist immediately formed under his goggles. He never thought that Senior Ling would actually mention him to the other great seniors outside of their daily lives. What an honor this was. Dharmaraja wiped away his tears of excitement. Seeing Mother Wang's worried expression as she looked outside the door, he used his heavenly eye to look through his goggles. Sure enough, he spotted a furtive figure on the side of the road. "Seniors, I see that person." The man was wearing sunglasses and a gray windbreaker, and he exuded a dangerous aura. Almost at the same time that Dharmaraja's heavenly eye tracked the figure, the man in sunglasses instantly raised his head. He was already fully aware that he had been discovered, but he didn't panic at all. His gaze met Dharmaraja's indifferent gaze, and a few seconds later, Dharmaraja's eyes widened in shock. "Not good." Then he was shaken by the look in the other party's eyes, and he stumbled back several steps. After taking off his goggles, Dharmaraja realized that his eyes were bloodshot. This was an expert. "It seems that he's an expert." Old man Wang sighed silently. It was clear that the person following Mother Wang didn't have good intentions. Damn it. Dharmaraja took out a pill to calm his spirit energy fluctuations and quickly swallowed it, then used the power of the godly thunder inheritance to protect his injured eyes. He realized that not only was the person outside very strong, he was also very cunning. That gaze just now had directly pierced the top of his skull, directly numbing his optic nerves and causing intermittent bloodshot fits. If it wasn't for the pill and the godly thunder inheritance, Dharmaraja felt that if it was someone else, their heavenly eye might have been crippled. After that exchange just now, Dharmaraja already had an assessment of this person's strength. He had already lost in a contest of auras, and this was no longer a fight he could intervene in at his level. Furthermore, Dharmaraja realized that this person's heavenly eye was extraordinary, and gave him a strong sense of deterrence. Although he couldn't be 100% sure, Dharmaraja felt that this person had probably refined his heavenly eye into a magic weapon to increase its lethality. Dharmaraja had already heard from grenade-throwing Senior Immortal in the chat group that this method of refining a part of the body into a magic weapon was the work of a dark force that had been causing trouble for Senior Wang's family recently. Thus, Dharmaraja guessed that this person was probably from Immortal Mansion. But now, what should he do? Did the seniors in the Wang family's small villa have to personally take action? As Dharmaraja sat cross-legged on the ground to regulate his breathing, he turned to look at Old Man Wang next to him and sighed slightly. "Senior, I'm very sorry. This person is really too powerful." He was a little vexed. He had wanted to do his best to show off in front of so many seniors. "No, you've already done very well." The old man smiled slightly. "You're a guest and this person is obviously here for us. It's only right that we deal with this trouble ourselves." The old man lowered his voice in a magnetic tone. Wang Ling had gone to participate in the school's military training, and even Loopy Toad had been picked up by their teacher in charge and wouldn't be back for a while. Perhaps in the eyes of those forces with ulterior motives toward the Wang family, this was a window of opportunity for them to come and cause trouble. Dad. At that moment, father and daughter's gazes met, and they actually felt a telepathic connection at the same time. "There's no other way," the old man sighed in his heart. Since they had deliberately come to cause trouble, a fight was unavoidable. With his hands behind his back and his eyelids slightly lowered, there was actually something mysterious about his old eyes. Old Senior Wang was going to make a move? Dharmaraja was extremely astonished. But he realized that things weren't that simple. Old Man Wang silently walked over to the door and put his hand on the doorknob. Almost the instant he opened the door, the old man's gaze swiftly turned to the second floor, and he shouted with great boldness, "Open the door! Let Jinka out!" Chapter 240. 10 minutes ago, a man in black sunglasses and a gray windbreaker had followed Mother Wang to the entrance of the Wang family's small villa. The man was tall and sturdy, and a beret covered his big bald head. At first glance he looked a little like those muscular men in foreign movies. "It's here." Under the sunglasses, the man narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction of the villa. He pulled open his lapel and pulled out the earpiece hidden inside to report the situation. "Chief, I found the target's location, just like the lady of the castle said." The voice on the other end of the earpiece was very low. "You did well, little Tan. Find out the truth about this family. Also, it's best if you can clearly investigate their relationship with that hawthorn tree. This has to do with Master's year-end assessment of me, so you can't be careless." The man nodded. "Don't worry, Chief. According to the information we gathered from various sources, the youth that Xiao Yu fought last time lives in this villa. It said that he only used one finger to catch the 50-fold power of Little Yu's abyss avoidance slash." Hearing this, the man couldn't help breaking out in a cold sweat. The Little Yu the chief was talking about was a genius whom Master had carefully selected from 10,000 people, and was also his trusted aide. Back then, Master had personally given him abyss avoidance at Immortal Mansion's annual party. This was a spirit sword that ranked first in speed on the historical cultivation list of swords. "No matter what, we have to be careful today. Apart from us, the southern, northern and western branches of Immortal Talisman are also looking for this family. The lady of the castle from Immortal Castle is an informant that I had arranged for many years ago. Since our eastern branch has gotten hold of this information first, we have to make good use of it." The call ended here. The man adjusted his beret and heaved a sigh of relief. This was because before he had made the call, he had already used his spiritual senses to carefully sense that that terrifying youngster didn't seem to be in the villa today. During the call, there had actually been a reckless person who had dared to glare at him with his heavenly eye. During the call with the chief, he had also opened his heavenly eye to retaliate, directly making the other party's eyes bloodshot. As the only fighting strength disappeared, the man looked in the direction of the villa and sneered. The man who had used the heavenly eye on him earlier should be the only combat power he could sense in this villa. Now that this person was injured, the man was certain that there would be no other unstable factors in this villa. Didn't this mean that he could do whatever he wanted in this mission? However, just as the man stepped into the entrance of the Wang family's small villa, he realized that the door of the villa was actually open. Then, the shadow of a brown sword shot out from the door. How fast could a spiritual sword be? The man called Xiao Tan felt that his worldview had been refreshed once again. Because his eyes were very special, the man had chosen the path of refining his eyes the year he joined Immortal Mansion. When he opened his third eye, his power would be dozens of times greater than that of an ordinary third eye, and he would be able to exert his dynamic vision to the extreme. However, when this brown sword shadow dashed out of the door, he was shocked to find that his eyes could not catch it at all. As the sword light approached infinitely, the man was so startled that he broke out in a cold sweat under his beret. However, the approaching brown sword shadow stopped about 10 centimeters away from the man. He saw the sword shadow dissipate into streaks of light before finally condensing into a human figure. It was actually a child in a brown and white robe, with short gray bangs dancing in the wind as he stared coldly at the man. This was a sword spirit? The man stared at this scene in disbelief. Unless the owner summoned a sword spirit on the spot through a contract, it was very rare for a sword spirit to manifest on its own under normal circumstances. The man felt that he had miscalculated. He had only focused on using his spiritual senses to sense a person's aura, but had overlooked a situation like the appearance of a magic treasure's weapon spirit. Whether it was a spirit sword spirit or a magic treasure's weapon spirit, all of their auras were sealed in the vessel before they manifested themselves, so it was very easy for people to overlook them. But he didn't have time to think about it now. Jianghu was already walking toward him. The man activated his third eye power to the extreme, and his pupils blossomed like a kaleidoscope. As he released the power of his third eye, golden blades appeared in the air, which finally condensed into a storm that spun like an electric drill as it stabbed toward Jianghu. These blades were made of spirit light formed from the spirit energy of heaven and earth, and were a product of the spirit energy of heaven and earth. They didn't have destructive power but were exceptionally sturdy. Combined with the third eye power, they formed a storm which was a devastating blow. This power was very impressive, and Dharmaraja in the villa was shocked to see it. If it hit him, it would definitely leave a big hole in his body. In the face of this storm of spirit light, Jianghu's expression didn't change in the slightest. Maintaining his indifferent attitude, he walked step by step toward the center of the storm. From his position in the villa, Dharmaraja could clearly see Jianghu's figure, and he felt that this sword spirit's eyes were very similar to Ling Jinren's. Ding. Ding ding ding. Ding ding ding. The storm wrapped around Jianghu and exploded into violent collisions, but Jianghu's sword light kept it all at bay. The man was shocked. He could clearly see how powerful this sword spirit was, but he never thought that his attack wouldn't have any effect at all. He opened his third eye and increased his third eye power, and 2 streams of blood flowed from the corners of his eyes. Looking at this scene, Jianghu stood motionless in the middle of the storm of spirit light. Then, with a snap of his fingers, a brown sword light burst out of Jianghu's body. This scene was like the descent of a miracle. This frightening storm of spirit light was actually forcibly parted by Jianghu, as if parting the sea to create a safe passage in the middle. Jianghu saw the man's jaw drop, but his expression didn't change in the slightest as he walked along the passage toward the man. In the end, Jianghu reached the man, and there was a huge contrast in their heights. The man was tall and sturdy at 190 centimeters. But Jianghu wasn't tall and only reached a little above the man's waist. Whether from afar or up close, he was just a child. However, there was no pressure from his aura. Just looking at the brown sword light gradually approaching Jianghu, the man was already so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. He was scared out of his wits, and even his knees couldn't help trembling. Chapter 241. By now, the man from Immortal Mansion's eastern branch had completely realized that this was a meaningless fight, because he had no chance of winning from the very beginning. "You're from Immortal Mansion?" At that moment, the man heard a rough questioning voice from beside him. It carried a thick sense of heaviness, and a huge shadow loomed over him. He saw 2 strong men with muscles as big as xuanhuans appear in front of him, and they were even taller than him. Where on earth had these 2 come from? No, wait. There seemed to be another person. Startled, the man looked up and saw that in addition to these 2 muscular men, there was also a little girl in a gray robe with pink-haired buns. She was sitting on the shoulder of one of the men, her head cocked to one side as she looked at him. The man was already completely confused. It wasn't just this sword spirit. These 3 people who had come out of nowhere all had auras stronger than his. If the man was given another chance, he just wanted to call his superior and tell him, "Chief, I don't want to play anymore." It wasn't a matter of whether he wanted to play or not, he couldn't beat them at all. There's no other way. The burly man from Immortal Mansion felt hopeless. The situation had exceeded his expectations time and time again, and was completely out of his control. Now he could only think of a way to escape. Fortunately, he had made sufficient preparations before coming here. He had prepared an Earth Escape talisman. As long as he had this talisman, even if these people were stronger than him, as long as the immortal talisman was successfully activated, he would have a chance to escape. At that moment, the man's mind was filled with countless thoughts, but it only lasted for a moment. He wanted to take advantage of the fact that this terrifying sword spirit hadn't completely surrounded him with the other 3 people on the other side to escape. He quickly formed a seal with his hands and threw out the burrowing talisman that he had prepared in advance. The moment the magic light shone, the ground under the man's feet suddenly turned into a mass of quicksand, and his whole body quickly sank into the sand. To ensure that he wouldn't be caught, he even cast a divine speed formula on himself. This was a high-grade heaven-grade spirit technique used to increase speed, and was also a secret body movement technique of Immortal Mansion. Under the effect of this divine speed formula, the man's speed increased by 5 times on the basis of the Earth Escape Talisman's escape speed. He felt that with his current speed he should be able to pull away from the 4 of them. Supported by the magic light of the Earth Escape Talisman, his figure was swiftly sucked into the wheel of quicksand under his feet, and he disappeared on the spot. Seeing that the burrowing talisman had taken effect, the man who had already burrowed into the ground along with the light let out a sigh of relief. However, the Earth Escape Talisman was forced to stop halfway. The man saw a little girl's face appear in the underground tunnel ahead. The little girl stared straight at him, then reached out with her little hands and pulled him out from the ground. Less than 10 seconds after the man used the burrowing talisman to escape, Sheep bounced back from afar. Jianghu saw that her little hand was holding a dog leash which was directly connected to the collar around the man's neck. Pen and Eraser were startled because it was Father Wang who had bought this collar and leash for Loopy Toad. Because Loopy Toad had always been unwilling to wear them, it had hidden them in the attic after buying them. Who knew when they had been tossed into Sheep's hands? Sheep's little hand gripped the dog leash as she threw the man in front of the 2 big men and straddled him. How boring. He's so slow. I even specially went upstairs to get the collar and leash just now. I didn't expect him to run so fast. The man wanted to cry a little. So it turned out that there was a bunch of big shots living in this villa that he couldn't sense? Jianghu crouched down and pressed one hand against the man's forehead. The man was instantly drenched in sweat and felt like he was about to be executed. The pressure Jianghu put on him was too great. There clearly wasn't a trace of spiritual pressure on him and he was just staring at him, but it felt like he was staring at death. Jianghu had already sensed the other party's aura in their previous exchange, but he hadn't been very sure. After careful comparison, Jianghu was now certain that this man was from Immortal Mansion. The scent of spirit energy on him was exactly the same as that of the red-haired young man who had fought the old devil with the abyss avoidance sword at the entrance of grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's house. Then Jianghu raised his hand. Several balls of brown sword chi gathered in his fingers, and he slapped the man on the head. He used sword chi to seal the man's spirit acupuncture points, and for a very long time, the man wouldn't be able to use spirit energy. Lord Jianghu, how should we deal with him? Pen and Eraser, the 2 big men, looked at Jianghu. Ling don't like troublesome. Jianghu looked at the man on the ground. You guys deal with him. I want to rest for a while. Now that the man was caught and his spirit energy was sealed, Jianghu couldn't be bothered to deal with him anymore, and would leave the rest to the others. He yawned, and the sword light around him surged again before finally turning back into a sword which fell into the hands of a big man on the side. Put me back on the bed. Pen and Eraser, the man rubbed his eyes. When he saw Jianghu change back into his original form, he thought he was seeing things. In the end, he was stupefied once again because he never expected such a powerful sword spirit's true form to actually be a peachwood spirit sword that could be found everywhere on the market. How should we deal with him? Throw him into the toilet? Pen asked with a sigh as he put Jianghu away and looked at the man on the ground. Throwing him into the toilet doesn't seem like a good idea. Eraser shook his head. This Immortal Mansion has come looking for trouble time and time again. It's not easy to catch them and we can ask them about their background. Pen, but Master isn't here now. It's fine, I saved grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's number, I'm sure he'll be interested. Saying this, Eraser took out his phone and dialed a number. Soon, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's magnetic voice came from the other end of the line. Hello, I'm grenade-throwing. What can I do for you, Your Excellency? Is this Senior Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal? I'm Ling Jinren's enlightened spirit Eraser. Just now, we caught someone from Immortal Mansion trying to break into the Wang family's villa. Are you interested in coming? The big man asked. Oh, so it's you. I know you. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal laughed. Now that you mention it, I suddenly remember that Dharmaraja went to your place today to deliver a sword. Didn't Dharmaraja make a move? Eraser was silent for a bit, then decided to tell the truth. The person from Immortal Mansion was very strong. Before Senior Dharmaraja could make a move, his aura backlashed him. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, before they even fought, he lost. Unfortunately, Senior Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, that's the truth. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal took a deep breath and dropped his forehead into his hand. Tell him to leave the group. It's too shameful. Chapter 242. If Dharmaraja had not seen it with his own eyes, he would never have imagined that there were so many big shots hidden in the villa besides these three seniors. That gray-robed girl with pink bun hair was absolutely terrifying. When she moved, she looked like a ray of light that flew everywhere. Not even Digga dared to do this. There were also two muscular men beside the little girl. One of them was wearing a straw hat, while the other was wearing a suit of armor. Their bodies were muscular and their bones were thick and sturdy. They stood there as mighty as mountains, giving off a strong sense of oppression. Dharmaraja shrunk his neck and his gaze fell on the old man next to him. Senior Wang, may I ask who these three seniors are? Oh, you mean them? The old man scratched his head. These were all enchanted by Ling Ling. The one in the straw hat was originally Eraser, the one in the armor was originally Pen, and the little girl was originally a tricycle. Lei Lei painted and waxed her not long ago. Dharmaraja was dumbfounded. There was actually such a thing? No wonder this little girl wouldn't let go of the tire in her hand. While they were discussing this with Grandfather Wang, Sheep had already dragged the man from Immortal Mansion into the villa at the entrance. This guy's spirit acupuncture points had all been sealed by Jinka, and he was now even more ordinary than an ordinary person. Apart from being a little bigger, there was nothing good about him, and he probably couldn't even beat Mother Wang, a middle-aged woman at the body condensation stage. As the man was dragged through the door, he opened his mouth wide and let out muffled sounds. Dharmaraja was very puzzled. His spirit acupoints have been sealed, how come he can't even speak? Oh, I just sealed his tongue acupoint. Eraser replied, let's leave the interrogation to Senior Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. We're all amateurs. Dharmaraja was shocked again. You called Senior over? That's right, Little Master Ling told us before that Senior Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal has been investigating Immortal Mansion all along. He had long since anticipated that these people from Immortal Mansion would lose their cool and come looking for trouble at the villa, so he had already told us beforehand that if we encountered them, we would capture them on the spot and then help Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal investigate them. So that's how it is? Dharmaraja nodded his head and admired Wang Ling even more in his heart. Ling Jinren, in the end, had even calculated this step. As expected, his foresight was miraculous. Oh, by the way, what else did the Supreme say? After coming back to his senses, Fu Wang had a grin on his face again. He felt that since he had personally come to deliver the sword, Senior should at least give him some praise. Eraser sank into silence once again. He hadn't planned to say anything at first, because he knew that Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was just joking. But since it had come to this, he finally decided to answer Dharmaraja's doubts. After thinking for a moment, Eraser said bluntly, Senior Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal wants you to leave the group. We haven't even started fighting and we've already suffered a backlash. This is too embarrassing. As a man he had a big body and a big heart. That was how upright he was. Dharmaraja's cheeks streamed with tears. So, Perfected Immortal hated him? As soon as he said this, Sheep, who was riding the man from Immortal Mansion like he was a horse, gave Dharmaraja a strange look. She seemed to have heard something shattering. After that, there was the sound of stir-frying in the kitchen as Grandfather Wang and Mother Wang personally cooked. Thinking that Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal would be coming over later, the old man stewed all the broccoli he had stockpiled last time into a pot of soup. There were also a lot of people sitting in the living room of the Wang family's villa. Pen and Eraser had initially planned to directly change back to their original forms after carrying out the task, but they had to wait for Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal to hand over the task before it could truly be considered over. So until then they still maintained their human forms. The old man had in fact never regarded these gremlins, who had been enlightened by Wang Ling as outsiders, and had very politely invited them to have lunch together. So at noon that day the Wang family's living room was especially lively. Eraser, Pen, Sheep and Dharmaraja were playing werewolf in the living room, while Sheep sat on the bound man from Immortal Mansion as a cushion. Apart from the three of you, there should be other seniors who have been enlightened by Ling Jinren in the villa, right? Dharmaraja took a look at his ID card and asked weakly while playing cards. We don't deserve to be called seniors. We're just gremlins who have been enlightened by Little Master Ling and can't cultivate. The strength of our realms is completely up to our master. Lord Dharmaraja has relied on his own efforts to cultivate step by step to reach this stage. You're the great senior. Eraser laughed and was very humble. Of course we aren't the only ones who have been enlightened in the villa, but apart from us, there are very few who can take human form. The only ones left are Lord Pen Immortal and Lord Ma. These two are Lightning Dharmaraja. Lord Pen's spirit's ability is similar to Lord Ma's. Lord Pen's spirit only needs to draw a circle to bring a person to any location. However, it's limited to a location that can be detected in the current world. The effect is similar to a teleportation door. The effect is similar to a portal, and the spaces that Lord Ma connects to are all extremely dangerous places, possibly alternate dimensions. Once you're sucked into one, you might never come back, Eraser explained. Hearing this, Dharmaraja felt like his worldview had been refreshed. Ling Junren was actually this strong. The magic treasures he had casually enlightened all had such formidable abilities. I have one more question. Dharmaraja took a deep breath. He felt that he had touched upon some taboo topic, but he really couldn't resist his desire to gossip. Do the three of you know Lord Jinka's origin? Oh, you mean Lord Jinka? I thought Senior Dharmaraja was going to ask some strange question. Eraser chuckled. Actually, Jinka's background was already no longer a secret. When grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had come to the Wang family's small villa back then, Grandfather Wang had explained Jinka's background in less than 10 seconds in one go. Lord Jinka, Little Master Ling's father, bought this from the flower and bird market back then, Eraser answered succinctly. Dharmaraja. That's it? That's right, that's it. Eraser nodded and said, also it's 998 yuan, a fair deal. Dharmaraja really wanted to calm down now. About 15 minutes later, Mother Wang and the old man had already prepared lunch. Dharmaraja estimated the time and felt that Senior Immortal would be at the villa's entrance soon. He raised his head and looked upstairs. Should I call Lord Pen Immortal and Lord Ma down for lunch? Oh, that's not necessary. Eraser shook his head. Lord Pen Immortal has a problem, and that's that he's very sleepy. It's best not to disturb him when he's sleeping. Dharmaraja. Then, what about Lord Ma? Hearing this, Pen, Eraser and Sheep all had horrified expressions on their faces. Senior Dharmaraja, are you willing to eat with the toilet? Chapter 243. After all this time, it turned out that this Lord Ma was actually referring to the toilet. Dharmaraja really wanted to bang his head against the wall. What the hell was this Lord Ma? He already felt that he couldn't keep up with these great seniors' train of thought. Could it be that cultivation nowadays didn't just rely on talent, but also on imagination? Dharmaraja sank into deep thought. In fact, there were a lot of things that Wang Ling had enchanted in passing in the Wang family's small villa. In addition to Lord Ma, there was also Lord Bao. It was just that this Lord Bao couldn't take on a human form, so Eraser had automatically ignored him. Lord Bao's original form was a donkey brand bag. This was Father Wang's gift to Mother Wang for her 20th wedding anniversary. In order to allow her to carry more things when she went shopping, Wang Ling had blessed this bag on the day he had given it to her. Lord Bao was very resourceful. Apart from helping Mother Wang carry a lot of things, if she ran into any trouble on the road, she could directly burrow into Lord Bao's storage space. In short, Lord Bao's space was so much more practical than Doraemon's. His skin was sturdier than Long John's. While Dharmaraja was contemplating life after witnessing all sorts of strange things in the Wang family's small villa, a beam of light approached the villa from the sky. Then, a man in white with beautiful hair descended from the sky. It was none other than grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. He carried an unknown immortal sword on his back, and at his waist were still those very dangerous-looking gray skybomb grenades. This was grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's standard when he went out. But if he took the subway in this getup, he would definitely be arrested on the spot. That skybomb grenade was a secret weapon unique to grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's family. Anyone who had seen it before could see its destructive power and ferocity. Furthermore, it was a hidden weapon and ranked first on the list of hidden weapons that could injure a soul formation cultivator. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal? Yo, hello everyone. Greetings, Senior Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. Eraser and Pen got up to greet him. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal? Shit. Why do I notice that your color has faded again? Come back to Uncle's place, Uncle will wax and paint your body. Yes, yes. Sheep clapped her hands happily. As soon as he entered, he greeted Pen, Eraser and Sheep with a hearty smile. Then he saw Fuang at the side and his smile froze. Then he chose to ignore it on the spot. He turned around and carried the big bags of broccoli he had brought with him to the kitchen to get close to Grandfather Wang and Mother Wang. After about 2 or 3 minutes of small talk, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal came out of the kitchen. The expression on his face was much more relaxed than before. Senior Immortal. Dharmaraja raised his hand in greeting. When they had entered earlier, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had directly ignored him, which made him feel a little embarrassed. You, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal looked at the man from Immortal Mansion whose acupoints had been sealed on the ground, then looked at Dharmaraja and sighed a little exasperatedly. As the successor of the godly thunder inheritance, it's one thing if you don't cultivate hard, but every day you think about making extra money in the Xiao family compound. You have the godly thunder innate in your hands, but you still lost to this kind of trash's aura. This is the consequence of not making progress. Dharmaraja was speechless and fell into silence. Because that was the truth. As a descendant of the 12 ancient clans, he was the only surviving descendant of the Thunder clan, and also the sole heir to the Thunder clan's holy relic. After all, the godly thunder inheritance was the only holy relic that had completely evolved from the Great Dochi period. It could be driven by spiritual energy alone. Dharmaraja had always felt that the Thunder clan's glory couldn't be restored by relying on himself, so all these years he had been relying on the Thunder clan's name to make money with the help of the godly thunder inheritance. Dharmaraja had thought that even if he didn't cultivate, he would still be able to obtain great power by relying on this holy relic. But after coming to the Wang family's small villa today, he realized that he really was just a frog at the bottom of a well. He was really too insignificant. I won't say too much. In the future you have to work even harder at cultivating. Lingzhenren is our goal. Seeing that Dharmaraja was reflecting on his actions with his head down, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal couldn't be bothered to say more. When all was said and done, the people in the group were his brothers and sisters. Sometimes there was no need to speak too harshly, and it was enough to stop where it was appropriate. Everyone was at the soul formation stage and was working hard to break through to the void refinement stage, so they had a rough idea of what was going on. Senior grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, you came just in time. This is the person from Immortal Mansion that we caught. Furthermore, he's probably a cadre. His spirit acupuncture point has already been sealed by Lord Jinka. Eraser pointed at the man under Sheep's buttocks. It's really been hard on you this time. It's also thanks to Brother Ling's foresight, knowing that this bunch of people would definitely come looking for trouble. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal smiled, which looked especially sunny. Actually, even if we hadn't caught this tongue today, Brother Ling would have found a way to find Immortal Mansion's stronghold when he came back. Back then, Brother Ling buried a bomb in the abyss avoidance sword of that red-haired Immortal Mansion youngster at my house so he could track his position. Eraser and Pen were silent when they heard this because they both knew about this. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had in fact said this deliberately for this man to hear. After that, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal stretched out a finger and directly unsealed the man's tongue acupuncture point. So now, do you have anything to say? This burly man from Immortal Mansion was very stubborn. I don't have anything to say. Don't even think about getting any information out of me. Also, I advise you not to try to read my memories. We Immortal Mansion people have Master's curse mark on us. If anyone tries to read our memories by force, they'll explode on the spot. When that time comes, you'll all die. Explode on the spot? Are you going to add a Thomas full-spin helix into the sky? You dare scare us? Pen snorted and wanted to step forward to teach this man a lesson. But before he could do anything, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal stopped him. Wait. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal ran his fingers through his hair and carefully examined the back of the man's neck, then sighed. What he said should be true. There are indeed traces of a curse mark on the back of his neck. Dharmaraja frowned. Then, Senior Immortal, what should we do now? We can only get him to confess himself. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal looked at the man on the ground and said, Do people from Immortal Mansion like to refine some strange part of themselves into a magic weapon? And I heard that this man seems to be extremely confident in his own power. Eraser nodded. His power is indeed very strong. Before Lord Dharmaraja could make a move, his eyes were already bleeding from the shock. Dharmaraja felt like he had been shot in the knee again. Could he not bring this up? It was so shameful. Very good. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal smiled inwardly, then got up and patted Dharmaraja on the shoulder. Dharmaraja, it's time for you to avenge this humiliation. Dharmaraja? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, someone open his eyelids for me. Then Dharmaraja used the godly thunder inheritance to directly blind his dog eyes. Until he confesses. Chapter 244. Special methods had always been grenade-throwing senior immortal's way of interrogation when dealing with special people. Of course, this was a little like private torture, but when dealing with dark forces who liked to play tricks behind the scenes, grenade-throwing senior immortal didn't think this sort of interrogation method was a big deal at all. There were times when grenade-throwing senior immortal felt that cultivation didn't make everyone understand the big picture. Everyone was at the soul formation stage, but everyone had a different understanding of this realm. The biggest difference was that some people understood more as they lived, while others became more and more clueless. It was very obvious that when the man heard that grenade-throwing senior immortal had told Dharmaraja to use the godly thunder inheritance, he couldn't stop breaking out in a cold sweat like a waterfall. The man looked at Dharmaraja in shock. "You're a descendant of the Thunder clan?" "That's right." Dharmaraja nodded. The man from Immortal Mansion. He absolutely never thought that the person standing in front of him now, who looked like a wretched uncle in goggles, would actually be a descendant of the Thunder clan of the 12 ancient clans. To be honest, when he had met Dharmaraja's eyes earlier, the man from Immortal Mansion had wondered for a split second whether this wretched uncle had acted in the role of a bus idiot or something like that. Because his temperament was completely unlike that of a descendant of the famous Thunder clan. It was simply too different from what he had imagined. Even if you couldn't use 100,000 volts, wouldn't the ideal person be a little fresh meat with a blonde hedgehog's head, a body wreathed in electricity, and an 8-pack abs? The man from Immortal Mansion really couldn't suppress the wild urge to curse in his heart. As it turned out, there were times when a person's dreams really could be shattered. Sheep straddled the man's body. From this angle, she could clearly see the disappointment on the man's face after confirming that he was a descendant of the Thunder clan. She noticed that the light in his eyes had dimmed considerably. Furthermore, this time, Sheep clearly heard the man from the Immortal Mansion's heart shattering. "After all this time, it seems this person is a fan of yours?" Grenade-throwing senior immortal crossed his arms with a funny expression on his face. Dharmaraja was flattered. He actually had a fan? That's normal. He's the only descendant of the Thunder clan who can use spirit energy to activate the holy relic, the godly Thunder inheritance. This should be considered a legend. The Thunder clan had left behind quite a reputation in the past. Grenade-throwing senior immortal pursed his lips and looked at Dharmaraja as he said, "If you continue to work as an electric welder for the Xiao family, you'll squander the last bit of your reputation." Hearing this, Dharmaraja's face showed a blushing expression. "A long time ago, our ancestors were indebted to the Thunder clan. Therefore, us juniors have always attached great importance to the Thunder clan." The man on the ground gritted his teeth and said, "However, I will not easily give in just because the person standing in front of me is a descendant of the Thunder clan. You have quite a backbone." Grenade-throwing senior immortal sighed helplessly at the man on the ground. Then he waved his hand. "Never mind, there's no hurry with the interrogation. Let's eat first. Old Senior Wang's broccoli soup must not be missed." Dharmaraja was a little surprised. "Ah, didn't you want me to blast him with the innate lightning? In any case, she's a fan of yours. Can you do it?" Grenade-throwing senior immortal laughed. Sure enough, Dharmaraja hesitated. Staring at the man on the ground, he thought carefully for a bit, and finally decided to drop the matter. Seeing grenade-throwing senior immortal's confident expression, he knew in his heart that the latter had most likely already thought of a countermeasure. Dharmaraja had always felt that in this world where looks were everything, his fans were actually a rare species. It hadn't been easy for him to find one, so it was indeed necessary to take good care of him. If he wasn't a fan, Dharmaraja would have already thought about electrocuting this person until he was medium rare or medium rare. During the meal, Father Wang and Lai Mengmeng didn't come downstairs, and were still discussing animatedly in the room. Grenade-throwing senior immortal directly served the food, and the man from Immortal Mansion was stupefied by his respectful manner. Now that things had come to this, he already couldn't use common sense to think about the situation in this villa, because given the current situation, there didn't seem to be a single normal person here. He clearly couldn't sense any fluctuations of spirit energy from the owner of this villa, but whether it was Great Death-Courting Senior or Lightning Dharmaraja, the descendant of the Thunder clan, they were all extremely respectful to the owner of this villa, and even called him Great Senior. The man deeply suspected that his ability to sense spirit energy was probably broken. During the meal, the man from Immortal Mansion didn't stay idle. Although he was already tied up tightly, he was still thinking of ways to make small moves behind the scenes in an attempt to tip Immortal Mansion off. After having a pleasant lunch with Mother Wang and Grandfather Wang, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal directly carried the man upstairs. Grenade-throwing senior immortal, who was nearly 190 centimeters tall, used just one finger to hook the rope and lift the man up as if he were picking up a chicken. He threw the man into Wang Ling's bedroom and then continued with the interrogation. Sitting on the edge of Wang Ling's bed, grenade-throwing senior immortal crossed his slender legs and stared lazily at the man in front of him. "Don't waste your energy, sheep, and the others already marked you when you came in. All the fluctuations of your magic artifacts and any communication signals will be cut off by this house, and you won't be able to connect to the outside world at all." There's this kind of operation? Dharmaraja was stunned again. Ever since he had come to the Wang family's villa, Dharmaraja had felt like a little fool, and was frightened every now and then. He carefully checked his phone and sure enough found that its signal had been blocked. No wonder there hadn't been any calls since the beginning. "I forgot to ask Sheep to set it up for you just now. The next time you come here you won't be marked," grenade-throwing senior immortal said as he looked at Dharmaraja. "Then what about senior immortal?" Dharmaraja asked in return. Grenade-throwing senior immortal said, "I'm a regular, so I've already set it up." As he said this, Dharmaraja noticed that grenade-throwing senior immortal was already lying on Ling Jinren's bed, completely paralyzed. Furthermore, his elbow was pressing down on Jinka, who was next to the pillow, but Jinka actually didn't care at all. There wasn't even the slightest fluctuation. Dharmaraja was speechless. This was more than just familiar, this was thoroughly familiar. This was Ling Jinren's bed, pillow, and sword. Even if he did it 100 more times, Dharmaraja didn't think he would have the courage to lie down so openly and leisurely on Ling Jinren's bed. Dharmaraja gave Wang Ling's soft single bed a deep look, and subconsciously swallowed. Chapter 245. Grenade-throwing senior immortal looked askance at Dharmaraja out of the corner of his eye as he stared at the bed. "Dharmaraja, are you thinking of something disrespectful and wretched?" Lightning King. Grenade-throwing senior immortal, I advise you not to think too much about Ling Jinren's bed. A few years ago Ling Jinren and I worked together to capture that ferocious six-fingered zither demon, and we lured him to Ling Jinren's bedroom. Who would have thought that this fellow would actually be unable to resist the temptation of this bed and directly lay down on it? Six-fingered zither devil? On the ground, the man from Immortal Mansion couldn't help sweating. This man's ferocity had been world-famous a few years ago, and the foreign media had even commented that he was a devil who was about to surpass Devil Emperor Guapai. But in the end, the six-fingered zither devil was captured for some unknown reason. Until now, he had been deprived of his spiritual power and was imprisoned in the holy prison. The specific details were not announced to the public. Dharmaraja gulped. And then? Grenade-throwing senior immortal sighed. From now on, this six-fingered zither devil won't be able to see his own fingers. Lightning Dharmaraja, are you saying that this zither demon is unlucky? Grenade-throwing senior immortal shook his head. No, that's the literal meaning. Dharmaraja and the man from Immortal Mansion. The moment this six-fingered zither devil was lying on Ling Jinren's bed, Lord Pillow Immortal cut off all of the 6 fingers he was so proud of. Grenade-throwing senior immortal. Lord Pillow Immortal was also enlightened by Brother Ling, so if an outsider wants to lie on this bed, unless Ling Jinren agrees, the outcome will be very tragic. Fuwang felt his back drenched in cold sweat and he abruptly took 2 steps back. Actually, you don't have to be so scared. If you accidentally rub against the bed, Lord Pillow Immortal won't do anything to you. Grenade-throwing senior immortal smiled and waved his hand. Then may I ask, how did you do it, true monarch? Dharmaraja asked curiously. Secret. Grenade-throwing senior immortal squinted and smiled. A year's worth of crispy noodle snacks in exchange for a year's right to lie on the bed. Such a good deal he definitely wouldn't tell anyone. The bedroom was silent, and the man from Immortal Mansion still had no intention of speaking. But Grenade-throwing senior immortal had said before that he had already thought of a way. Thus, only Dharmaraja was left anxiously. True immortal liked to keep people guessing, and this personality had never changed since they first met. After another quarter of an hour or so, Grenade-throwing senior immortal finally got up from his paralyzed Gyo position and looked out the window with a smile. He's here. Grenade-throwing senior immortal then quickly got up, his white clothes fluttering as he walked. Considering that visitors would ring the doorbell and disturb the seniors in the villa, Grenade-throwing senior immortal quickly got up. Therefore, he went downstairs and stood guard at the entrance of the Wang family's small villa. A moment later, an uncle who looked to be in his early 40s walked over from afar with a takeaway bag. It was still the same deep eye socket, the same long scar that extended from his right eye all the way down to his neck. Yo, hello, Boss Tan. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal greeted him from a distance. When Boss Tan saw the person who had ordered the takeout, the corners of his mouth straightaway twitched. "Why are you here?" 800 Li takeaway, and the noodles were burnt. If it hadn't been for 10 bowls of noodles in one go, he wouldn't have come. Boss Tan put the bag in Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's hands. "Here, your 10 big bowls of Lao-Tan pickled cabbage beef noodles." Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal took the bag, his bright smile still on his face. "Boss, why is Midnight Dining Hall delivering takeout at this hour? Business isn't good." Boss Tan spread his hands and said, "It's true that the restaurant opens at night, but we have to make good use of the time during the day. I think it's a good idea to deliver takeout." Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal nodded. "Actually, there's something else I wanted you to personally deliver the takeout this time." Boss Tan immediately chuckled. In fact, the moment he saw Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, he had already had a premonition. "Tell me what's up." Boss Tan sighed and asked, "The hawthorn seeds I gave you last time didn't grow anything?" That shouldn't be the case. He had sent the real thing back then, and the story was also true. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to say goodbye to the past for good and start a new life, plus it just so happened that someone wanted to investigate the identity of the maker of the stone ghost mask, Boss Tan felt that he wouldn't have handed over the seeds so easily. "No, it's not about the seeds." Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal shook his head with a smile and moved sideways to make way for the door. "Boss Tan, please come with me to take a look." Boss Tan stared at the door with a hesitant expression. To be honest, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had still doubted his speculation until he had seen Boss Tan. But now that he had seen Boss Tan with his own eyes, he could confirm that Boss Tan's spirit energy attribute was indeed very similar to that of the man from Immortal Mansion inside. In addition, Boss Tan had personally advised him to stay away from Immortal Mansion when he had come to the restaurant for noodles before. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had reason to believe that the man from Immortal Mansion inside might be related to Boss Tan. Boss Tan was very sharp and seemed to have already sensed something. Although he was downstairs, his eyes were fixed on Wang Ling's bedroom on the second floor. The afternoon light shone on Boss Tan's knife scar, which looked like it had a story behind it. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal remembered that Boss Tan had said it was because he had accidentally tripped during the chaotic battle when he had fled the sect and happened to bump into a holy weapon that was still in operation. This story sounded a little strange and dramatic, but the point was that it was very, very mysterious. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had always felt that the story behind this knife scar might not be as simple as it sounded. Boss Tan gazed upstairs with a bottomless gaze. All these years he had been running away from his past. Sure enough, he couldn't escape what was coming. After hesitating for a while, he waved his hand and looked at Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. "Lead the way." When they entered the villa, Grandfather Wang and Mother Wang were still washing the dishes in the kitchen. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal went in to greet them and said that he had brought a friend to participate in the interrogation. The old man was a pretty easygoing person, and didn't ask too many questions before directly agreeing. Standing outside the kitchen, Boss Tan was very surprised when he saw Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's humble attitude as he asked questions and bowed. He didn't know why, but he felt like he was being surrounded by big shots. After that, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal led Boss Tan upstairs. At the bedroom door, Boss Tan raised his eyebrows with his hands clasped behind his back. "Is this the place?" Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal made a sound of agreement. "We caught someone from Immortal Mansion. Boss Tan, do you recognize him?" Boss Tan nodded silently. As soon as they entered, the sturdy Immortal Mansion man on the ground floor sensed something. He raised his head a little fearfully, and happened to bump into Boss Tan's knife scar face. The two of them stared at each other in silence. After a moment, the Immortal Mansion man turned pale with fright, and was actually so scared that he directly shrank into a corner. "Brother, why are you here?" Chapter 246. Although they had already guessed that Boss Tan might be related to this man from Immortal Mansion, neither Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal nor Dharmaraja had expected them to be so close. "Bro, little brother?" Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal blinked, feeling like he was watching a third-rate, melodramatic TV series. Whether it was in terms of build or appearance, Boss Tan and the man on the ground were very different. Boss Tan was of medium build and had obvious muscles, but he wasn't as tall and sturdy as the man on the ground. Looking at the man huddled in the corner, the corners of Boss Tan's mouth twitched visibly, and he rubbed his forehead as if he had a headache. "Didn't I tell you to leave back then? Why are you still fooling around there all these years?" The man looked a little aggrieved. "The master said that as long as I completed one more task, I could be promoted to director level. I was thinking of retiring after I was promoted to director level and getting my pension. Boss Tan was instantly speechless. His little brother was still so naive, believing everything. He even believed nonsense like getting a pension. Boss Tan couldn't help recalling how he had chosen to leave back then when he had recognized the master of Immortal Mansion's stingy nature. Because the master of Immortal Mansion was so stingy that his salary wasn't even as much as his shop. Of course, the master of Immortal Mansion's stinginess was only one of the reasons Boss Tan had left. The main reason was that Immortal Mansion's waters ran too deep. Furthermore, he had long since realized that the master of Immortal Mansion was actually a pervert. How long has it been since my little brother was caught and brought here? Boss Tan asked with a sigh. Less than 2 hours ago, Dharmaraja replied. If I remember correctly, Immortal Mansion has a fixed schedule for reporting back. Whether the mission succeeds or fails, if you don't report back within the allotted time, it will be considered a mission failure. Boss Tan narrowed his eyes. He knew all too well that once a mission was judged a failure in Immortal Mansion, the person carrying out the mission would very quickly become a target. Go to the balcony and make a call. The signal is blocked here, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal said. Boss Tan nodded and without saying a word, he directly took the phone out of the man's arms. Dragging the man's upper body over the balcony, he pressed the callback button and put it on speaker. He stared at the man in front of him. Do you know what to say? The man looked aggrieved. Brother? Boss Tan's expression was very serious as he pressed a hand against the man's head. Cut the crap. Behave yourself or I'll crush your head with my scissor legs. The man, soon, a voice came from the other end of the phone. Hello. Xiaotan, how was the mission? The man was silent for a moment and finally answered honestly, reporting to the director, I encountered a little trouble, but it's not a big problem. Oh, do you need backup? There's no need for reinforcements. I can handle it myself. Alright, I'll be waiting for you to return victorious. As soon as he said this, Boss Tan hung up the phone and heaved a sigh of relief. Sorry for the trouble. Let me introduce my younger brother, Tan Qian. No wonder. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal said, I've always felt that his and Boss Tan's spirit energy attributes are very similar. When you spoke just now, I suddenly felt that even your voices were similar. May I ask if this little brother Tan and Boss Tan are twins? Yes, we're twins, Boss Tan said. Don't you think that his appearance and figure aren't like mine? That's because he cultivates Immortal Mansion's Panwu immortal martial arts. This technique can make up for a lack of innate talent, but the downside is that once you cultivate it, you'll grow taller and taller, change your original appearance and shorten your lifespan. Boss Tan seemed to be recalling a lot of things. I've seen with my own eyes people who cultivate this technique for 100 years grow into giants that are dozens of meters tall. When they run they look like mutated zergs. Mutated zergs? The corners of grenade-throwing Senior Immortals and Dharmaraja's mouths twitched. Do you know what happens to these mutated zergs? Boss Tan looked at his little brother with a meaningful expression. I've heard from the director that those who cultivate the Panwu Immortal technique have been arranged by the master to enter the immortal abode of Peach Blossom Spring. They've become the most capable subordinates of the immortal abode, and they can obtain everything they want there, Tan Qian replied. It seems you don't know the situation at all. Boss Tan chuckled, his expression a little sad as he said, those who cultivate this technique are indeed sent to a place called Peach Blossom Land in the end, but it's actually a secret execution ground for Immortal Mansion. Anyone who cultivates the Panwu immortal martial arts to the later stage is executed. Furthermore, each of their bodies is a massive body of energy. How could this be? Tan Qian was stupefied. He had no idea what was going on at all. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal and Dharmaraja also broke out in a cold sweat. After a cultivator died, the corpse itself was in fact a massive body of energy. But what did the master of Immortal Mansion need such a massive body of energy for? Unfortunately, I only got to this point in my investigation back then before I chose to leave. I don't know what their ultimate goal is. I had to expend a lot of energy to avoid these guys back then. Boss Tan's expression was clearly a little sad. Then do you have your own deductions, boss? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal frowned. If what Boss Tan said was true, then Immortal Mansion's viciousness was completely beyond his imagination. I probably have some deductions. Boss Tan continued, what I know is that the master of Immortal Mansion is actually a spirit sword collector. He has already collected more than 2/3 of the spirit swords on the historical ranking list of cultivation swords. Furthermore, based on the clues I have so far, he probably wants to create a peerless godly sword that can crush all the swords on the list. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal suddenly thought of something. People from Immortal Mansion came to my house to cause trouble before in search of the maker of the stone ghost mask. Could this have something to do with it? It's very likely. Boss Tan nodded. If they want to create a peerless godly sword, they have to find a powerful weaponsmith. Hearing this, Tan Xian felt like he was about to give up on thinking. He hugged his head and curled up in a corner in pain. Senior Immortal, are you going to deal with him? Boss Tan looked at Tan Xian, then turned his head to look at the young man in white in front of him. Perhaps he doesn't know as much about Immortal Mansion as I do. As long as Senior Immortal is willing to let him off the hook, he can tell me whatever he wants to know. I'll definitely tell him everything I know. Since he's your little brother, we can actually discuss what to do next, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal replied. That's good. Boss Tan exhaled. But Senior Immortal, I have a favor to ask of you first. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal nodded. Go ahead, Boss Tan. It's said that Senior Immortal has a lot of strange tricks up his sleeve. Do you have any way to make someone forget the art they cultivate? Boss Tan looked at Tan Xian and said, he hasn't cultivated the Panwu immortal martial arts to a high level, but this art is addictive. Once you cultivate it, it's very easy to become addicted and it's hard to stop. Unless you forget it. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal understood. Indeed, as Boss Tan said, it would indeed be very dangerous to continue cultivating this art. But it was really too difficult to completely erase one's memory. Furthermore, the text of the art would be imprinted in the depths of a person's brain when they cultivated it, which was the hardest thing to forget. Boss Tan, Senior Immortal, do you have any good ideas? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal scratched his head and pointed at Tan Xian's. How about punching him? Boss Tan, Tan Xian and Dharmaraja. P.S. Tan Siming, hello everyone, let me introduce you. This is my younger brother Tan Xian. Chapter 247. Memory loss always happened inadvertently. Even if there was a way to erase a memory, it would only erase an entire memory segment. It was really difficult to extract a memory of a single event and erase it. As expected, it won't work? Boss Tan sighed helplessly. If there's really no other way, we'll have to use force. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal raised his eyebrows. For example? Boss Tan. For example, when he's addicted to martial arts, we can tie him up and stop him from making hand seals. But there's another big problem with this, which is that whenever he's addicted to martial arts, he'll go berserk and it'll be very difficult to restrain him then. Saying this, Boss Tan's eyes lit up. Unless, we have the golden canopy rope. The three auspicious treasures again. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal suddenly remembered that he still had the 7-star sword which he had obtained from Ayu, the lady of the castle's right-hand man. Actually, after that, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had asked Little Black to investigate the remaining 2 magic treasures. Currently, he knew that one of the genuine purple gold gourd was in the old devil's hands, but there had been no news on the whereabouts of the golden canopy rope. On the side, listening to their conversation, Tan Xian's eyes were unprecedentedly downcast. If it hadn't been for today's incident, he wouldn't have thought that Immortal Mansion's waters ran so deep. Brother, when I get back, I'll tell them I resign. No, given the current situation, it's safer for you to stay in Immortal Mansion. You can also cooperate with us in our investigation of Immortal Mansion. This bunch of people actually turned you into this? It's better to just get rid of them all. Tan Xian was startled by Tan Siming's gaze. This was the first time he had seen such an expression on his brother's face. Boss Tan's eyes darkened. The most important thing now is to find a way to help you suppress the side effects of the Panwu immortal martial arts. How about we wait for Ling Jinren to come back and ask him? Dharmaraja suddenly interjected. Ling Jinren? Boss Tan patted his head as he suddenly remembered. Oh, isn't that the young man who wrote songs in my shop before? He had thought that this young man wasn't simple. Who would have thought that he was actually a big shot? Ling Jinren has remarkable abilities, he definitely has a way. But we won't know the specifics until he comes back. He's still in military training at school, said Dharmaraja. School, military training? Because he had already met Father Wang before, Boss Tan had already guessed that Wang Ling was his student. But when he heard Dharmaraja's words with his own ears, Boss Tan actually still couldn't suppress his shock. This lightning Dharmaraja and great death-courting senior grenade-throwing senior immortal in front of him were both famous people in the cultivation circle. For people like them to address Wang Ling as Jinren and senior, Boss Tan really couldn't imagine why this Ling Jinren was so obsessed with school. As expected, knowledge was power. Only by studying could one become a big shot. That night, Tan Qian left after having dinner with Boss Tan at the Wang family's small villa. The old man warmly received the Tan brothers. It was Boss Tan's first time meeting Grandfather Wang, but even that first meeting was enough to make Boss Tan admire him from the bottom of his heart. In the face of Tan Qian's previous offense and harassment, not only hadn't this Grandfather Wang gotten angry, he had instead returned good for evil. This was the kind of bearing that only a true great senior could have. On the way back to Immortal Mansion, Tan Qian flew on his flying sword, his emotions a little complicated as he gazed at the small pill bottle in his hand. For the time being, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal hadn't been able to find a way to suppress his addiction to the Panwu immortal martial arts, so he had given him this bottle of sleeping pills. For now, stopping cultivating this art and completely cutting off his addiction was the best method he could think of. This bottle of sleeping pills had been personally refined by Immortal Toya. Just half a pill was enough to make a soul formation cultivator sleep for 3 hours, and they wouldn't wake up even if the sky collapsed. The effect of a whole pill was usually 6 hours, which was just enough to balance out the time when the addiction flared up. But relying on sleeping pills wasn't a long-term solution. As a person's realm grew higher, their resistance to the drug would increase. This bottle of sleeping pills would last for half a month at most, after which its efficacy would plummet. Of course, this wasn't the real reason for Tan Qian's complicated feelings. It was because he realized that he had come to the Wang family's small villa today to investigate this family situation. In the end, he had failed and been caught instead. After being taught a lesson by his own big brother, he had then been sent to Immortal Mansion to continue being a spy. As for the master of Immortal Mansion's ultimate goal, it had just been his brother Tan Siming's speculation. Although Tan Qian felt that his speculation was pretty close, he still needed to work hard to gather some concrete evidence to prove his ultimate goal. Tan Qian was surprised to find that he had actually become the legendary snitch. Sometimes, coincidence is a wonderful thing because you never know what's going to happen next. What would happen next? Even Wang Ling, who knew the fate profiling spell and had helped Dopiguo predict his fate back then. However, he couldn't predict his own fate. It was June 20th on Monday in the 9th week of the semester. The joint military training exercise for the 6 schools had ended, and the school had specially set aside this day for the students to relieve their fatigue and digest the knowledge they had learned during the military training. To be honest, Wang Ling hadn't gained much from this military training, since he had been planning to fish in troubled waters from the very beginning. Although Dopiguo had suffered from Mother Wan's Fan Bing Bing before the military training, he was the one who had benefited the most from it. All the famous schools had offered him an olive branch, and even a spirit sword product company had invited him to be their spokesperson. His future career could be said to be bright. Dopiguo had once said that his dream was to open the largest fresh produce market in the country. Whether it was in terms of scale or reputation, it had to be bigger than his family's pet shop. At that time, Wang Ling had indeed predicted Dopiguo's fate. According to the results of his prediction, Dopiguo's dream would come true in 500 years. Now Wang Ling finally understood. It turned out that this military training was the source of all evil. That night, when Wang Ling returned to his bedroom in the Wang family's small villa, he found traces of Jinka's attack. Before he had left, he had put Jinka under his pillow, and when he came back he found Jinka by his pillow. Sure enough, in the 2 days he had been gone, someone had still come looking for trouble. Wang Ling suddenly felt that he had made the right decision to leave Jinka at the villa back then. Ling Ling, come down and eat first. Downstairs, Mother Wang had already prepared dinner. Wang Ling put Jinka down again and went downstairs. It was only then that he realized that Loopy Toad hadn't followed him up just now. That was because when Loopy Toad was halfway down the stairs, the old man had stopped it and rubbed its face. As he rubbed Loopy Toad's little fat face, the old man frowned and muttered in his heart, "Why has this child lost weight?" Chapter 248. Ever since Loopy Toad had thoroughly accepted its fate of becoming a dog, it could be said that it had become more and more integrated into modern cultivation life. Starting from number 60 high, it had slowly integrated into the Wang family's life. The old man only knew that Loopy Toad had been a demon king before, but he had never mentioned its original identity in front of Loopy Toad. Everyone was curious, but the old man was well aware that as a former demon king, Loopy Toad also had its own pride. The past was the past, and the old man now only regarded Loopy Toad as a member of the Wang family. It was enough to know that it was a loyal dog. In the Wang family, apart from its little master Ling, Loopy Toad was closest to Grandfather Wang. Teacher Pan had borrowed Loopy Toad to participate in military training, and after a few days, it looked like it had lost a lot of weight, which actually made the old man's heart ache. Actually, it wasn't that Loopy Toad had lost weight, but that its cultivation had advanced, and its body looked more refined than before, which was why it had the illusion of thinness. But the old man didn't understand this. Seeing that Loopy Toad had lost weight, he began to rack his brains to come up with nutritious meals for it to become stronger, full of confidence that Loopy Toad would become a sturdy toad. That night, while Wang Ling was still eating, the old man had already prepared an extra meal for Loopy Toad. Wang Ling saw the old man tossing a spoon around in the kitchen with a smile on his face as he looked at Loopy Toad at his feet. "I'm already so old, how long do you think I can live?" Loopy Toad suddenly raised its head and looked at the old man a little suspiciously, not knowing why he had suddenly asked such a sad question. It didn't know how to predict fate, but it knew a little about physiognomy. Loopy Toad was well aware that it wouldn't be a problem for the old man to live to 100 years old. "Even if I can live to 90, that's less than 30 years. You're a demon king and you know how to cultivate, so you should be able to live longer than me, right?" The old man smiled foolishly and crouched down to rub Loopy Toad's head. "No matter how long I can stay with you in the future, or who you'll be guarding the door for in the future, right now you're my dog." Wang Ling watched this scene from the other side of the door. He saw tears in Loopy Toad's eyes. After dinner, it was time for the old man to watch a drama. Thanks to Mother Wang's recommendation, the old man had watched an entire episode of The Legend of True Rings. Then, under Father Wang's careful guidance, he had finally learned the search function for TV dramas and was able to search for the ones he was interested in. Recently, the old man had been watching a large-scale youth food inspirational TV series, The Spicy Year of Green Onions. This TV series told the story of a young chef from a family of chefs, his childhood sweetheart, his little sister, and his warm boyfriend, who were fighting together for the god of cookery. They were searching for the legendary divine onions that could elevate the freshness of their dishes to the highest level. In order to find the legendary divine onion, the three of them went through many trials and tribulations. In the end, the main character's sister sacrificed her ancestral white lotus to lure the divine onion out. Just as the divine onion was about to suck the white lotus dry, the main character and his best friend made a decisive move and killed the divine onion. In the end, the three of them teamed up and became top chefs. Holding Loopy Toad, the old man stroked its fur with one hand and wiped his tears with the other. When he had watched The Legend of True Rings before, he hadn't cried like this. Now, however, he was purely moved by the main character's arduous struggle for his dream of becoming a god of cookery, and he resonated with him in a wonderful way. He couldn't help sighing emotionally in his heart. This was King Youth. On the other hand, Loopy Toad stared blankly at the TV, clearly stunned by the plot of the TV series. Loopy Toad gave up on thinking. When Loopy Toad returned to its room at 8 o'clock in the evening, it found little Master Ling cleaning Jinka's sword. Jinka's cleaning method was completely different from other spirit swords. It couldn't come into contact with water or be rubbed with spirit sand, as that would destroy the patterns on the sword. In essence, Jinka was still a peachwood sword, so Wang Ling had to be even more careful when he took care of it. It had been a long time since Wang Ling had given Jinka such a meticulous cleaning. He needed to attach his spirit energy to the spirit soil specially used to clean wooden swords, and then cover every corner of Jinka's sword like a facial mask. After the spirit soil had completely dried up, Wang Ling would peel it off bit by bit. This job looked very simple, but it was meticulous work, so Wang Ling's expression was especially solemn each time he cleaned Jinka's body. This was probably the most serious expression Loopy Toad had seen Wang Ling apart from when he was studying. Loopy Toad stared at Wang Ling and for some reason, it felt a little sleepy in this silence. Very quickly, it felt like its eyelids couldn't take it anymore. In its dream, Loopy Toad realized that it was actually watching from God's perspective. It dreamed of an unfamiliar fat man. The fat man's mouth was full of blood, and he was tied to an iron pillar. In front of the iron pillar stood a red-clothed Taoist. The Taoist in red sneered, and with a flick of his fingers, the spirit energy behind him instantly transformed into hundreds of magic swords which abruptly pierced the fat man's chest. In the next moment, the scene before his eyes changed. Loopy Toad saw the Taoist in red throw all these hundreds of blood-stained magic swords into a furnace. What on earth did this dream mean? Loopy Toad was a little stupefied from its omniscient view as it heard the Taoist in red laugh wildly after throwing all the magic swords into the furnace. Following this laughter, Loopy Toad abruptly woke up from its dream. It got up abruptly as if it had just had a nightmare. In front of it, little Master Ling was still cleaning Jinka's sword. Loopy Toad looked at the alarm clock hanging on the wall. The time was fixed at 8:05. This seemingly long and fragmented dream had actually lasted only 5 minutes. What on earth was going on? A few drops of cold sweat trickled down Loopy Toad's forehead. Even though it was usually in the habit of sleeping, it rarely dreamed. Could it be? This was the Toad clan's omen dream? Suddenly Loopy Toad's eyes widened. It recalled the legend of the Toad clan. Toads were lazy by nature and loved to sleep, but they rarely dreamed when they slept. Dreams were omens. Although Loopy Toad had now become a dog, its soul was essentially that of a toad. But this dream was really too strange. From beginning to end, the dream was fragmented and anticlimactic, and the person it dreamt of was someone it had never met before. King Omen Dream, at least tell me the story. It wasn't like they were playing Detective Conan right now. Did they have to incorporate a puzzle-solving element into the dream? Loopy Toad lay on the ground and pulled at its ears, suddenly feeling a little pain in its head. Given the current situation, it felt that for the time being, its IQ wouldn't be able to break through the truth of the dream. Chapter 249. Loopy Toad felt that its prophetic dream was a little like a pipe dream. However, the difference was that the legendary Golden Millet dream was a beautiful dream of enjoying a lifetime of glory, splendor, and wealth. When they woke up, even the rice hadn't been cooked. But Loopy Toad couldn't tell what was so special about its dream. Loopy Toad had no idea who that maniac in the dream with hundreds of magic swords behind him was, or who that fatty whose heart had been pierced by 100 swords was. Furthermore, Loopy Toad noticed that these people's faces were becoming more and more blurry in its mind. In its dream, these people's faces had clearly been censored in high definition, but after turning its head, they were just shadows in its mind. Loopy Toad scratched its dog head and looked a little irritated. It wanted to tell little Master Ling about this, but Wang Ling was still busy and had no time to pay attention to it. After thinking about it, Loopy Toad decided to first record what it had dreamed in its human observation diary, in case it forgot it later. After Wang Ling helped Jinka clean up, he found that Loopy Toad had already fallen asleep at the foot of the bed. Flipping through the study materials, he spent 2 minutes reviewing them, and another 3 to preview the upcoming course before he was ready to rest. After the military training, the pace of life slowed down again, and he returned to his favorite and most familiar pace. He always felt that collective life was not very suitable for him, but he also felt that it was not as bad as he imagined. However, even though the pace had slowed down, the things that he had to deal with had not decreased at all. Wang Ling already knew about Boss Tan, and had always felt that the master of Immortal Mansion's identity wasn't simple. At the very least, he was the most difficult person Wang Ling had encountered so far, and was even more troublesome than the old devil. General Yi had been able to successfully capture the old devil this time purely because the old devil hadn't yet recovered to his peak. Another reason was that this devil emperor was, after all, an upright man. He was far less cunning than the master of Immortal Mansion. When that young man from Immortal Mansion who had appeared under the hawthorn tree had come to cause trouble, Wang Ling remembered that he had left a spirit energy signal on his abyss avoidance sword, but until now there had been no response. He didn't know whether this signal had been detected or not. As a dark force, the greatest taboo was for the location of their sect to be exposed. One thing was certain: the master of Immortal Mansion was definitely on guard against this. Now they could only wait for further news from Boss Tan's younger brother, Tan Qian. At the desk, Wang Ling looked at Jinka and couldn't help raising his eyebrows. He didn't know whether the master of Immortal Mansion's ultimate goal was to forge a peerless divine sword. But there was one thing he could be sure of. This time it must be June 21st, the 9th Tuesday of the semester. After school that day, Sheep appeared punctually in an alley next to number 60 high school and leaned against the wall, waiting for Wang Ling. Grenade-throwing senior Immortal had originally been the one to take her to paint today, but because he had to help reconstruct the bodies of the delivery men from last time, he didn't have the time at all, so Wang Ling had taken Sheep instead. Just before school ended, Wang Ling received an address from Grenade-throwing senior Immortal. The owner of this magic weapons shop was surnamed Luo, and he was a skilled smith himself. He had already cared for Sheep once before, so it should be said that he was very familiar with it. There was no need to worry about the technique. Moreover, Boss Luo was actually one of them. It was just that Boss Luo didn't like to chat online, so he didn't join the chat group. It was also Boss Luo who had repaired the pill furnaces that Immortal Toya had blown up previously. As soon as Wang Ling stepped out of the school gate, he could already sense Sheep's location. When he turned into the alley, he saw that Sheep was actually surrounded by a group of delinquents. These delinquents had dyed hair, nose rings and earrings, and some of them even had gold chains around their necks. Those who didn't know better would think that they were rappers who had come out of China's Siha variety show. Sheep's small body was surrounded in the middle of this group of delinquents. She was only 1.4 meters tall, shorter than Jinka. She was wearing a small gray windbreaker, and anyone who saw her fair and cute little face would want to take a bite out of it. At that moment, Sheep was forced to lean against the wall, her face expressionless. Big brother, she looks like she's still a kid. Don't you know that there's a saying that Lolas have the body of a mature sister? This kind of kid is more fun to play with. The tattooed man with the 2 gold chains around his neck was breathing heavily. He looked Sheep up and down and was a little excited. Little friend, are you lost? Come with Big brother will buy you a lollipop. I'll take you to play games. Looking at this scene from a distance, Wang Ling narrowed his eyes, but didn't intend to intervene. Reality proved that in the face of these hooligans and delinquents, the more taciturn you were, the more the other party would take advantage of you. After just a few words of provocation, the tattooed man with the gold chain straightaway decided to make a move. He stared at Sheep's bun and stretched out his hand. The bun was really too cute and he couldn't help but want to pinch it. Unfortunately, as soon as his fingers got close, Sheep straightaway dodged to the side, causing him to grab nothing but air. Oh, you're pretty agile? The golden chain delinquent hadn't expected this little Lolita to move so quickly. Furthermore, after his provocation just now, the little Lolita's eyebrows were completely furrowed and her cheeks were puffed out slightly. She already looked a little angry. Deske, this was the kind of temper he liked. The golden chain delinquent chuckled, the expression on his face becoming even more vulgar as he directly stretched out his hand to grab Sheep. But Sheep's movements were really too fast. She moved like the wind. She was clearly just dodging left and right, but such a small distance actually created afterimages. The delinquent's jaws dropped in shock, because this definitely wasn't a speed that a normal human could produce. This little Lolita's movements were really too fast. It was impossible to catch her with the naked eye. It was obvious that she was a cultivator. But she was clearly just a child. The delinquents didn't dare believe the scene in front of them. Some of them wanted to dissuade the golden chain delinquent, but unfortunately the golden chain delinquent lost his temper. Every time he was so close to catching her. I catch. I still catch. I catch. However, every attack was dodged by Sheep by the side. 5 minutes later, the golden chain delinquent was so tired that he couldn't move anymore, and was gasping for breath with his hands on his knees. Bean-sized beads of sweat fell to the ground as he stared at Sheep and wiped it away, completely giving up on resisting. You can go, consider yourself lucky. Sheep raised her eyebrows and snorted, then walked out of the crowd of delinquents unscathed. Before she left, she tilted her head and cast a sidelong glance at the golden chain delinquent. It's only been 5 minutes and you're already done, your endurance is really bad. After saying that, Sheep walked toward Wang Ling without looking back. Chapter 250. It was obvious that this golden chain delinquent had been poked in his sore spot by Sheep. He knelt on the ground and swore, "There was once a cute Lolita in front of me but I didn't cherish her. When I lost her it was too late for regrets. There's nothing more painful than this in the world. If God could give me another chance he would say, never, ever, play jumping left and right with a Lolita." The reason why Sheep had chosen to meet Wang Ling in the alley was that he liked to keep a low profile. But when Wang Ling took Sheep out of the alley, they still attracted a lot of attention. Sheep's pink hair buns formed a sharp contrast with her little gray windbreaker, which was really too eye-catching. She obediently followed behind Wang Ling, maintaining a distance of about 10 feet between them. Thus, when he took Sheep out, Wang Ling felt as if someone was watching him. If that was the case, he wouldn't be able to use teleportation because he would definitely be discovered. Furthermore, he was still wearing his school uniform. If someone discovered his teleportation, Wang Ling felt that it would make the headlines tomorrow. A certain number 60 high school student could actually teleport? Was this a distortion of human nature or a loss of morals? So, in the end, Wang Ling chose to take Sheep to Boss Luo's shop on the subway. After passing through the long overpass, which faced number 60 high school's Qingyun Road Line 1 subway, Wang Ling calculated that there were 8 stops in total between here and Wuyang Road. Since the founding of Huaxiao Nation, subway routes had crisscrossed each other, forming a dense and complex network that ran through the entire underground space like a spider's web. Although there were still many cultivators who chose to fly their swords to wherever they wanted to go, they had to pay a toll, and from time to time, they would be stopped to verify their personal information. In contrast, people only needed to go through a security check when they entered the station on the subway. Although it was slower than flying a sword, there were a lot fewer procedures and unnecessary troubles. The interior space of the subway cars had now been expanded using space expansion technology, so everyone could find a place to sit and it was no longer a crowded scene. When Wang Ling entered the subway, he saw all kinds of people. Ordinary office workers with briefcases as well as cultivators in strange clothes who exuded spirit energy. In order to determine whether a person was a cultivator or not, the most direct and reliable method was always through the perception of the soul sense, because you would never know whether a person wearing an ancient costume standing in front of you was a cultivator or a cosplayer. Ordinary people couldn't see the magic treasures that cultivators carried with them with their naked eyes, but that didn't mean they weren't dangerous. Thus, cultivators were restricted from carrying spirit swords and magic treasures when they entered the station. They had to be stored in storage bags and weren't allowed to be taken out or used. In the subway there was a spatial magic treasure that could detect signals. Once a fluctuation was detected, a group of subway attendants would appear in front like the Red Guards. Wang Ling led Sheep through the emergency exit. Looking back, he was surprised to see an acquaintance. It was Li Miaozhen, Immortal Toya's disciple and Director Li, whom he had met at Second Hospital back then. Director Li was blocked by 2 subway security personnel at the security checkpoint, and the expression on his face was a little awkward. Watching from a distance, Wang Ling was surprised to find that Director Li's destination was actually also Boss Luo's place. Today he was going to pick up a sword. Previously, he had left an immortal sword at Boss Luo's place for maintenance. He had originally planned to take the subway to pick it up, and when he got the spirit sword, he would fly the patient's urine sample to the branch hospital. In the end, he had unexpectedly been stopped at the subway security checkpoint. A security officer pointed at the glass bottle that Director Li was carrying. "Sir, what is that yellow thing in your glass bottle?" As the director of the hospital, Director Li had the obligation to protect the patient's privacy, so he refused to answer with a strong sense of righteousness. "I'm sorry, I can't tell you. Is this a poisonous and harmful substance?" The security personnel frowned and stared at Director Li with vigilance. Director Li, "Of course not, security officer. If not, I'll treat you to a sip." Director Li, in the end, Wang Ling didn't choose to get involved in this mess. Shanghai City subway security had always been very strict. Now that Director Li had been caught, he probably wouldn't be able to get out for another hour or so. The worst thing was that Director Li had come out in plain clothes this time. He wasn't wearing a white coat and didn't even have a work ID. It would be strange if he wasn't treated as a suspicious person when he was stopped with a bottle of an unknown yellow liquid. It just so happened that it was the evening rush hour after school, and today's subway traffic was as high as usual. Although there was no need to worry about not having a seat on the subway, the platform outside was still a little crowded. Sheep followed Wang Ling obediently. It was too crowded nearby, which made her feel a little uncomfortable, so she took the initiative to step forward and hold one of Wang Ling's fingers with her small hand. Wang Ling was blank, but when he saw the huge flow of passengers nearby, he let Sheep lead him. Sheep looked around curiously, blinking her eyes the whole way. Holding Sheep's hand, Wang Ling stood in front of the platform and waited for the subway. He could feel a lot of gazes in his direction, but he was sure that they weren't looking at him, they were all looking at Sheep. Anyone who saw a cute girl who looked like a porcelain doll couldn't help but take a second look. An old auntie stood behind Wang Ling. After staring at Sheep for a long time, she couldn't take it anymore and took the initiative to talk to Wang Ling. "Young man, are you taking your sister out to play?" Wang Ling was silent, then nodded his head. The auntie crouched down and stared at Sheep. The more she looked at her, the more she liked her. Her heart itched uncontrollably and she wanted to pinch Sheep's face, but was a little embarrassed. "Ah, your sister is so cute. Is she your biological sister?" Wang Ling could only continue to nod. He didn't really want to talk to this auntie in front of him, but unfortunately the moment she saw Sheep she completely lost her mind. Older people always had a different kind of affection for children. "Your sister is so cute and you're so handsome, your mother must be a great beauty." As they chatted, the auntie took the opportunity to pinch Sheep's bun head. Surprisingly, Sheep didn't resist. In fact, it was Sheep who was thinking. She felt that since she had been personally enlightened by little Master Ling, her relationship with him should be even deeper than that of a sister. So all of a sudden, Sheep raised her head and looked at the auntie in front of her with a serious expression. "Auntie, I'm actually not his sister." Both Wang Ling and the auntie looked at Sheep in horror. Sheep pointed at Wang Ling, "He's my dad." Wang Ling, "Auntie?" Accompanied by the roar of the subway, the two of them were instantly thrown into confusion. Chapter 251. As soon as the subway doors opened, Wang Ling directly grabbed Sheep's hand and ran inside. The auntie in front of the platform was so shocked by Sheep's words that she was so stunned that she actually forgot to get on the train. By the time she came back to her senses, The train on line 1 had already sped off with the sound of the police siren closing the doors. In the subway workshop, Wang Ling held Sheep's hand with a slightly helpless expression on his face. Actually, there was nothing wrong with Sheep's understanding, but there were times when randomly calling someone dad without warning could really scare people into pissing their pants. Wang Ling didn't understand how a pure virgin like him, who was as white as a sheet of paper, could suddenly become a father. Actually, Sheep couldn't be blamed for this situation, because no one had ever explained things to her in the Wang family's small villa. Because Sheep was young, Pen and Eraser had worked together with all the gremlins in the Wang family's small villa to set up a rule that forbade telling dirty jokes in front of Sheep. Over time, this bunch of gremlins who talked nonsense every time they opened their mouths didn't really know how to talk to Sheep anymore. Wang Ling felt that he should find an opportunity in the future to give Sheep a good explanation and popularize some necessary knowledge, so as not to cause unnecessary trouble again. Boss Luo's shop was located at number 300 Wuliang Road in the old district of Songhai City. This was an old street with a very long history. Wang Ling had once heard people say that the reason this street was named Wuliang Road was because a venerable immortal Wuliang once had a mansion here. Some people said that this entire mansion had been built from the legendary divine Wuliang tree. In ancient times, the divine Wuliang tree had been a divine tree that could grow endlessly and reach the heavens. However, it was a pity that the immeasurable tree, which was recorded in history, had been destroyed by a few almighty beings during a war between nations. Even now, an old painting of the old mansion was still circulating online, and Wang Ling had seen it before. But that old painting was really too old, and Wang Ling couldn't judge the authenticity of the old mansion from it. But the one thing he could be sure of was that this old mansion was definitely no longer on Wuliang Road. Back when Huaxiao Nation had just been founded, all the major streets had been renovated, and rumor had it that this old residence left behind by Immortal Emperor Immeasurable had died at the hands of a demolition team. Following the address, Wang Ling arrived at the door of a shop called Fatty Luo Metal. The style of the buildings on the Immeasurable Road was similar. They were all antique and didn't have any landmarks. He could only follow the house number to find the place he wanted to go. After the demolition team accidentally demolished the old house left behind by the Immeasurable Immortal, the government had been doing repair work. Later they simply changed the entire Immeasurable Road into a street block. They also erected a statue of the Immeasurable Immortal at the end of the street, with a personal profile of the Immeasurable Immortal written under the statue. Then, the entire road inexplicably turned into the former residence of the immortal sovereign Immeasurable. Wang Ling seriously suspected that the person who had written the introduction probably didn't even know who venerated immortal Amit Ba was. When Wang Ling took Sheep to the door of the shop, he noticed that the threshold of Boss Luo's shop was unusually high. It was more than half a meter high. He crossed the threshold with Sheep in his arms. As soon as he entered, he saw a fat man with a potbelly in a white sweatshirt and baggy pants leaning back in a bamboo chair, fanning himself with a palm leaf fan and a pipe in his mouth. Be careful when you enter. Although the threshold of our shop is made of wood, it's very valuable. Do you know the immeasurable wood? The last piece of immeasurable wood in the world is right here. Sensing that someone had entered the shop, Fatty Luo fanned himself and spoke without even looking. Seeing that the person hadn't responded for a long time, Fatty Luo opened his eyes slightly to take a look, and immediately jumped out of his chair in shock. So it's Ling Jinren, my apologies. Fatty Luo had never seen Wang Ling before, but he had seen Sheep before. He knew that the rumored Ling Jinren had brought Sheep here for a maintenance today, so he could deduce the identity of this youngster from Sheep. Because of grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's crazy support for Wang Ling, the people in the chat group were very respectful of Wang Ling. Although Fatty Luo wasn't in the group, he was still a member. When the people in the chat group came to him for maintenance on their magic artifacts, they would more or less mention some of Ling Jinren's glorious deeds to him. It was a good thing that Wang Ling wasn't in the habit of casually bragging about his friends to others, otherwise this would be the legendary, mutual commercial bragging. Today was the first time Fatty Luo and Wang Ling met. Judging from his attire, he was a rather casual fatty, but at first glance, Wang Ling didn't find him annoying at all. On the contrary, he felt that he was quite amiable. Fatty Luo fumbled around in his underpants for a long time, and finally found a slightly yellowed business card in another pair of underpants hanging on a bamboo chair. He handed it to Wang Ling. Ling Jinren, this is my business card. If you need me for anything in the future, give me a call in advance. Wang Ling looked at the introduction on the business card. Fatty Luo Metal Shop Manager Luo Chuang. After putting the business card away, Wang Ling began to carefully size up Fatty Luo's shop. It actually wasn't very big. there was a wooden counter at the entrance, and next to it was a lounge chair that Fatty Luo used to rest on. On either side of the counter were two large wooden cabinets that looked very heavy. Each wooden cabinet was densely packed with hundreds of drawers. At first glance, it looked a little like the structure of an old traditional Chinese medicine shop that specialized in treating psoriasis. The shop is a little messy, Ling Jinren, don't mind it. Seeing Wang Ling's expression, Fatty Luo chuckled. The cabinet on the left contains magic artifacts that have already been maintained. They're waiting for customers to pick them up. The cabinets on the right are still being maintained and repaired, and they have serial numbers on them. Every day I'll fix a few of them according to the numbers. Hearing this, Wang Ling couldn't help raising his eyebrows. He hadn't expected Fatty Luo, who looked like a big, burly man, to be such a meticulous person. Grenade throwing and I have known each other for a long time and we're all brothers. Before Ling Jinren came, grenade throwing specially called me, so there's no need to line up. Fatty Luo waved his palm leaf fan and smiled. His eyes were very small, only the size of mung beans. When he smiled, they became slits and his eyeballs couldn't even be seen. Will it take long? Wang Ling asked telepathically without opening his mouth. Not long, not long. Ling Jinren, please sit here for a moment. I'll bring sheep into the inner room for repairs, it'll be ready soon. Looking at his watch, Fatty Luo beckoned sheep into the inner room. When they reached the inner room, Fatty Luo suddenly flipped his hand over and pulled open a drawer on the counter. I've prepared some snacks in this drawer. If Ling Jinren doesn't mind, feel free to try them. Snacks? Wang Ling walked closer to take a look. Good heavens, this entire drawer was filled with crispy noodle snacks of various flavors. Chapter 252. Wang Ling's first impression of Fatty Luo was that he was lazy on the outside, gentle on the inside, observant and enthusiastic. To be honest, Wang Ling was a little surprised to see this drawer full of crispy noodle snacks. He realized that although Fatty Luo didn't go into the chat group, he didn't receive any less information than the others. He even knew exactly what Wang Ling liked to eat. And the most important thing was that Fatty Luo was very strong. Wang Ling had noticed this as soon as he entered the shop. Although Fatty Luo's aura was well concealed, it still couldn't escape Wang Ling's perception. If a true expert wanted to know the depth of another person's realm, they couldn't just release their aura. Often, when the other party's aura was concealed, it was possible to accurately determine the other party's realm and strength through perception and formula calculations. And it was very obvious that Fatty Luo was a hidden expert. If Dharmarajas without the godly thunder inheritance were used as a unit of measurement, Fatty Luo's strength was equivalent to that of 1.5 Dharmarajas. Wang Ling didn't have to wait long outside the shop before Fatty Luo came out with sheep. After a series of maintenance and repairs, Sheep's face was glowing, her pink hair was even more vibrant than before, and the two little buns in her hair were as soft and adorable as puddings. Her originally fair little face was now glowing. This time I gave her a new layer of durable paint and spirit wax. She's too fast, and the materials used for the maintenance couldn't keep up with the constant consumption at her absolute speed. I believe that after this maintenance she should last longer than before, Luo Chuang said. Wang Ling nodded and thanked him. Brother Grenade Throwing has a card in my shop, and called me earlier to tell me that he'll pay for the maintenance. We're all brothers and it's the first time I've met Ling Jinren, so I'll let him off the hook. Although the raw materials for my lacquer and wax aren't cheap, it's still affordable for my brothers to use. Fatty Luo waved his palm leaf fan and said with a smile, it wasn't easy for Ling Jinren to come here this time, so I have a request. Tell me about it? Wang Ling raised his eyebrows and directly spoke telepathically. His expression was very relaxed, because he had already known that things wouldn't be so simple. This fatty looked harmless, but his mind was quite meticulous. An enemy like this would be quite scary. Fatty Luo chuckled, the fat on his face wrinkling up like a meat bun. This hardware shop has been passed down from my ancestors. In addition to running it and doing some magic artifact repair and maintenance work, Ling Jinren should have heard that I'm also a smith. Fatty Luo laughed mischievously. Fatty Luo's eyes lit up. Wang Ling nodded. Of course he knew of Fatty Luo's identity as a smith. Even if Grenade Throwing hadn't told him, he could see it from the details. Because of refining all year round, a refiner's physique was usually very strong. Although Fatty Luo had some fat on his face, under the white shirt, there were actually pieces of exquisite muscle. Ling Zi Chuang and Ling Zs Ling King and Li. Ling Chin Fatty Ling smiled. I say I Fatty Yang said I say you I said Yuan you and Yuan say Ling Ling said I said I of the. Chin s ling honest I ling I very I honest the I had. Ling. Oh, so he wanted to see Jinka. Spirit light directly flashed in Wang Ling's hand, and then Fatty Luo saw a peachwood sword 1 meter and 20 centimeters long appear steadily in his hand. Actually, letting someone see one's personal spirit sword was quite a private matter. Fatty Luo had thought that Wang Ling would refuse. After all, this was their first meeting, but Wang Ling's attitude was astonishingly straightforward. Then, Fatty Luo stared blankly at Jinka. He felt that he couldn't move his eyes away. Although it was just a peachwood sword, the patterns on it were impeccably exquisite. Fatty Luo couldn't help stretching out his hand, but before he could touch Jinka's blade, he could already feel the invisible sword chi lingering around the wooden sword. It has its own protective sword chi? Fatty Luo turned pale with shock. He had come into contact with countless spirit swords, but had never seen one that could continuously produce protective sword chi without its owner's spirit energy activating it. Could this be the legendary, immortal machine? Fatty Luo's hand paused in midair. In that moment, the fat on his face trembled, and his heart was filled with unprecedented excitement. Ling Jinren, can you put the sword on the sword tray on the counter? Fatty Luo was extremely excited as he wiped away his tears and asked Wang Ling. Wang Ling nodded and put Jinka on the sword tray. Fatty Luo didn't dare directly touch Jinka, which had its own protective sword chi. Instead, after Wang Ling put Jinka on the sword tray, he put down the palm leaf fan in his hand, put on a pair of white gloves, and lit the incense burner on the side. The incense in this incense burner has the effect of soothing a sword spirit. It was given to me by a friend of mine whose family makes incense for generations. His surname is Gu, and I'll introduce him to Ling Jinren when I have the chance. In short, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Fatty Luo put the lid on the incense burner and looked at Wang Ling gratefully. Then he stood respectfully in front of Jinka and bowed to him. I've offended, Lord Jinka. Wang Ling saw Fatty Luo's Adam's apple roll up and down as he slowly touched the sword. Fatty Luo hadn't felt this way in a very long time. He had seen countless spirit swords and magic weapons in this world, but this was the first time in 100 years that he had seen a spirit sword that had instantly stunned him with just one look. Good sword. Luo Peng held Jinka in admiration. He did his best to restrain his excitement and prevent his hands from trembling too much. Holding up his miniature magnifying glass, he looked at the sword from tip to hilt for a very long time, as if he was examining a beautiful object. After looking at it for a full 5 minutes, Fatty Luo put Jinka back on the sword tray and sighed deeply. As the rumors say, Lord Jinka's sword is perfect and impeccable. There's almost no flaw to be found. If you insist on a flaw, perhaps there's a fly in the ointment? Wang Ling couldn't help raising his head curiously at Fatty Luo's words. May I ask Ling Jinren if Lord Jinka has a scabbard? Fatty Luo took off his white gloves and habitually picked up his palm leaf fan and slowly fanned himself. The perfection of a sword isn't just in the sword itself. The scabbard is also a very important part. If the sword is the soul, then the scabbard is the flesh. Lord Jinka's body is constantly protected by sword chi, but without the protection of a scabbard, there will definitely be drawbacks in the future. Scabbard? When Fatty Luo said this, Wang Ling already remembered everything. Actually, when Father Wang had bought Jinka, he had a scabbard. But at that time, his hand had been itchy, and he had directly crushed the scabbard. So at that time, only Jinka's original body had survived. Chapter 253. It wasn't that Jinka didn't have a scabbard, but that Wang Ling had crushed it when he was a child. There was a mysterious substance in Jinka's blade that Wang Ling still hadn't been able to see through to this day, and it had an important effect on restricting Wang Ling. But this substance was different from the special substance in the Dao Talisman seal that Wang Ming had given him. It wasn't the kind of thing that would make Wang Ling feel powerless upon contact. This peachwood sword was just a street item that Father Wang had picked up from a flower and bird market, and Wang Ling still hadn't clearly investigated its origin. Back then, Jinka had actually been born as a sword spirit 6 years ago, when the gate between worlds had first descended. There had been a time when Wang Ling had even wondered if Jinka had something to do with the gate between worlds. But later he realized that it had just been a coincidence. Because Jinka's sword chi was too righteous and didn't have the slightest bit of evil in it. It could be hung over a bedside table to ward off evil, and it could be lifted to slay demons and behead devils. Wang Ling suspected that Jinka had been born after absorbing the essence of socialist core values. Thinking about it carefully, Wang Ling felt that this was the first time he had noticed the scabbard. Because Wang Ling had crushed Jinka's scabbard when he was very young, he hadn't paid any attention to it at all. Even when he usually helped Jinka clean the blade, he hadn't noticed it. So when he heard Fatty Luo's words, Wang Ling stared at Jinka on the sword hilt and pondered deeply. As Fatty Luo said, it went without saying that a scabbard was a great help to a sword. Not every sword could automatically generate protective sword chi like Jinka could. In the absence of a scabbard, more spirit swords would be corroded. Although Jinka had protective sword chi, that didn't mean that the scabbard wasn't important. The sword itself accounted for 70% of a spirit sword's overall power, while the scabbard accounted for 30%. When the two were combined, a spirit sword's power could be maximized. Lord Jinka's body is already very powerful. If you can find a suitable scabbard for him, he'll become a truly peerless godly sword with extraordinary power. Fatty Luo looked at Jinka and sighed regretfully. Waving his palm leaf fan, he looked at Wang Ling and wanted to say something, but in the end he opened his mouth and didn't say anything. Fatty Luo looked at the time and realized that it was still quite early. Wang Ling had come over right after school with sheep, and including the time spent on the road, it had taken him less than an hour to finish the care. After a round of maintenance, Sheep was clearly in much better spirits than before, and she blinked curiously as she sized up Fatty Luo's shop. Apart from the magic treasures already in the cabinets on the left and right, there were also some magic treasures from Fatty Luo's collection. Fatty Luo openly hung these magic treasures on the wall for display, and each magic treasure had its own spirit power protective cover. To be honest, Ling Jinren, these magic treasures are my proudest collection. Fatty Luo chuckled. I've looked for an expert from a proper department to appraise every single one of them, and they're 100% authentic. Furthermore, they've all been preserved, so if any of them are damaged, we'll get 95% of the compensation. Sheep's gaze swept around before landing on an item that resembled an armor made of beast hide. It was a flesh-colored beast skin armor that was covered in fur. There was also a helmet on the armor, and there were two huge fangs on the left and right sides of the helmet. What's this? Sheep asked as she stretched out her little finger. Have you heard of the heavenly demon pig? Fatty Luo asked. The sheep blinked and shook her head. It was actually a heavenly demon pig? Wang Ling's eyes lit up, because he had read about it in historical records. The sky demon pig was the first demon king to come out of the gate between worlds when it first appeared. At that time, the sky demon pig's arrival had caused an apocalyptic flood. And the most troublesome thing was the heavenly demon pig's superbody. In its superbody state, this demon pig's defense was at its peak, and it was as tough as a demon god's. In that battle, if General Yi hadn't seized the opportunity when the heavenly demon pig's superbody weakened, he would have been able to kill it in one blow and stop the damage in time. The consequences would have been unthinkable. In order to get this pig skin and tusks, I paid a huge price and went through many twists and turns. In the end, I managed to get my hands on this pig skin. I originally wanted to use it to make a full set of robes, but unfortunately there weren't many raw materials left, so I used it to make a set of animal skin armor. As long as you put it on and activate it with spirit energy, you'll have the super body effect for a short period of time. There are a lot of so-called authentic heavenly demon pig skin armor circulating on the market now, but they're all fake. Mine is the only one that's authentic. Fatty Luo waved his palm leaf fan as he looked at the pig skin armor he had made, his heart full of pride. I was invited to an auction once, and when I realized that someone was actually selling heavenly demon pig skin armor, I was so angry. Does he really think his fake pig armor is the best in the world? Wang Ling, everyone had their own pride and things they were proud of. Take Fatty Luo for example. He wasn't someone who cared about his appearance because he had once been handsome, who hadn't had a moment of peerless beauty. But Fatty Luo had realized 100 years ago that good looks didn't have the slightest king use to him. Becoming an outstanding weaponsmith was the most important thing to him, and the various magic treasures he had collected over the past several hundred years were what he was most proud of. Apart from this heavenly demon pig skin armor, there were actually quite a few other items in the shop that Fatty Luo treasured. Wang Ling was surprised to find that most of Fatty Luo's collection was actually defensive equipment. In the past several hundred years, I've traveled all over the country and collected the toughest defensive equipment I could find. Fatty Luo grinned. Of course, my greatest wish is to be able to create a peerless godly sword that can easily destroy all this defensive equipment. As he said this, Fatty Luo's gaze abruptly pointed behind the door of the shop. Wang Ling and Sheep followed his gaze and immediately saw a shield hanging behind the door. It was a dark blue shield, and its surface was covered with layers of scales that were arranged in an orderly manner like fish scales. At first glance, this shield didn't look like anything new, but it actually gave off a faint aura of the deep sea, and when you sensed it carefully, you actually felt like you were drowning and suffocating. What was this? Wang Ling narrowed his eyes and somehow felt that this thing wasn't simple. This is a shield made from the scales of the western deep-sea water spirit hog dun. Its skin is quite thick, and its defense is enhanced in places with water, such as rainy days, lakes, the sea and so on. Fatty Luo said, it's also called Huadun for short. Chapter 254. It was June 22nd on Wednesday in the 9th week of the semester. Later this day would be recorded in the annals of history, because it happened to be the day the old devil would be put on trial. The old devil had been arrested at a military base on the outskirts of Shanghai City, along with the master of Shadow Stream Jianghu, who had been trapped in the stone ghost mask at the time. The plan to capture the old devil had been discussed beforehand, so in the end, the old devil was directly sent to Shanghai First Prison to be interrogated on the spot. In fact, since the day the old devil had been arrested, online news and public opinion had already been flooded with comments online. Any news about the old devil would have tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of comments. This was enough to show the old devil's social influence. This was a figure who had struck fear and awe into the hearts of the entire Huaxiao nation back then. Dubbed Devil Emperor Guapai, he had been known as the leader of the biggest evil force back then. Wang Ling had always felt that if there was a prize for the biggest dark force, the Guapai army which the old devil had led back then would definitely be second to none. At 6 o'clock in the morning in the interrogation room of Shanghai First Prison, the old devil was still in Jiang Liuyue's body as it sat obediently in a wooden chair. It was still wearing the spirit shackles as it faced Warden Liang, General Yi, Secretary Da Kong and a group of senior prison officers. 8 people were sitting in a row in front of the old devil, and next to them was a live broadcast camera. In order to show how much importance the government attached to this matter, and at the same time to respond to some rumors online, General Yi's interrogation this time was open and transparent, and was directly being broadcasted live. Is everything ready? General Yi tilted his head and asked a staff member next to him. Everything is ready, General Yi. We'll start directly when the live broadcast host cuts in and the camera turns green. The staff member bent over and pointed at the camera in front of him as he replied softly, the host just did a warm-up before the live broadcast. Currently it's ranked first in TV ratings, and in less than 5 minutes since the live broadcast started, there are already more than 20 million people watching the live broadcast online. Based on this trend, it's estimated that when the interrogation starts, it'll break 100 million. Hearing this, General Yi's eyes abruptly dimmed a little. He hadn't expected this devil to still be so influential after so many years. What is General Yi thinking about? Asked the staff member when he saw General Yi's somewhat profound gaze. It's fine. General Yi scratched his head. It's just that the higher-ups told me that it'd be best if the viewership for this live broadcast of the trial didn't exceed that of the Spring Festival Gala. That's why the situation is a little awkward. The staff. Then should we begin? General Yi looked at the old devil and took a deep breath. Let's rehearse first. The staff. 5 minutes later, the old devil faced the camera. As soon as the staff member said begin, the old devil cooperatively lowered his head and started to repent. I was wrong, I was really wrong. I shouldn't have barged into the National Palace because of some personal issues. The destruction of people's property and life safety has a very bad impact on society. General E, then what about the previous delivery men? The old devil, my venerable self is very sorry about the rice ball delivery incident, but my venerable self has kept the souls of those deliverymen. Those deliverymen whose souls dissipated under the sun in the news have actually been kept in the small world of my purple gold gourd. General E nodded and glanced at the question on the paper, then asked, can you briefly explain to the public what happened before and after you were arrested? Before the battle, I wanted to infiltrate the small world to absorb the vitality of those children and activate the body rotation array to revive myself. But unfortunately the plan failed. After that, I was locked down by the 5 elements great array and couldn't escape. The old devil raised his head and stared at the camera. In the end, I lost to General Yi's palm heart sword. General E held up 4 fingers. Do you know, what you did can only be described with 4 words. Everyone around him, outrageous. General E, for more words. Everyone around him, you're insane. The old devil, now that we have concrete evidence of your crime, we'll follow the procedure and send you to the Supreme Court. Do you have anything else to say? As soon as General E finished speaking, a staff member on the side suddenly called for a halt. General E frowned. What's going on, what's the problem? A female screenwriter came up to General E and whispered in his ear with a slightly embarrassed expression, "There's nothing wrong with the basic procedure. But there's something wrong with the way you express your emotions." After that, the female screenwriter looked at the old devil and said, starting with the line, "My venerable self was wrong. Mr. Devil Emperor should look a little more downcast. It would be best if you could express the grief of a broken family and broken up family." The old devil, the female screenwriter, although it sounds a little difficult, it would be best if Mr. Devil Emperor could squeeze out a few tears. That would be better. The old devil, the female screenwriter lowered her head and looked at the script in her hand. "There's one more thing. I hope Mr. Devil Emperor can describe in detail how General E used the palm heart sword. The script has already been written, so Mr. Devil Emperor can take a good look at it later and memorize it in 2 or 3 minutes. During the narration you have to show fear of the palm heart sword." The old devil, General E, after hearing the female screenwriter's words, even Secretary Dakong was shocked. "Is that necessary?" During General Yi's rehearsal, the higher-ups were also watching, and they unanimously agreed that this part needed to be strengthened. On one hand, it would reflect General Yi's strength, and on the other hand, it would bring about positive energy in society and set an example for the vast number of cultivation students who are still learning, the female screenwriter replied. "General E, there's another matter that requires General E and Secretary Dakong to make a decision together," the female screenwriter said. "What is it?" While the host was on the field just now, the CEO of Cultivation Hardware and Concealed Weapons Technology, Evil Monarch xianxia, Sect Leader AI of the Five Elements Sect, and Sect Leader Su of the Exploding Sky Sect all sent congratulatory messages in the bullet screen. Secretary Dakong raised his eyebrows. "Isn't that a good thing? They're all celebrities in the cultivation circle. It's very meaningful for them to spread positive energy in society. The problem is that after Sect Leader Su of Exploding Sky Sect sent his congratulatory bullet messages, he sent 3,000 yachts. After that, Sect Leader AI of Five Elements Sect didn't want to be outdone and sent 3,001 yachts in return. After that, Lord Xianxia also followed suit. In just 3 minutes, the number of yachts exceeded 10,000. The host would like to ask, should we express our congratulations? The female screenwriter asked. Chapter 255. According to the analysis of relevant experts in the media, the live broadcast of the trial should be the first great feat in Huaxiao Nation in recent years. While the whole nation would be educated about the basic law through the live broadcast, it would also greatly intimidate those criminals in the dark and suppress the arrogance of the evil forces. That morning, Wang Ling was still gnawing on his bread when he saw the number of viewers of the live broadcast increase at a speed visible to the naked eye. In less than 10 minutes after the start of the broadcast, it had already broken 100 million. Then, Wang Ling saw the server crash just like that. When he opened the live broadcast room again, a huge 404 popped up on the screen. Wang Ling, the old man, didn't know how to use a cell phone to watch a live broadcast, and when he saw that Wang Ling's page had turned into a 404, he straightaway sighed. Like I said, this high-tech stuff is sometimes unreliable. It's better to just watch the live broadcast on TV. After saying that, the old man reached out to turn on the TV with practiced ease. As expected, the live broadcast on TV was relatively stable, but there were no rows of bullet messages or the shock of a bunch of bigwigs flaunting their wealth and showering each other with gifts. In fact, there were only 3 types of people who were concerned about the live broadcast of the old devil's trial. The first type were mostly middle-aged and elderly people who were genuinely concerned about how the situation would develop. They were also very concerned about the old devil's final outcome. The second type were young people. Most of them were concerned about the social impact of this incident and the impact it would have on their future lives and jobs. According to the media, there were even some young entrepreneurs who had already registered trademarks for Old Devil and Devil Emperor Guapai. Just like the blue thin mushroom incident a while ago. The third type were young people. These people were usually relatively simple-minded, and most of them only watched live broadcasts online. Furthermore, they didn't care about the incident itself. They only liked to watch the bullet messages and watch the big shots in the cultivation world who appeared in the live broadcast room and showered them with gifts. But Wang Ling didn't feel that he belonged to any of these 3 types of people. He felt that he was more of a melon citizen, or the so-called melon-eating masses. The old man crossed his legs as he watched the TV. At that moment, the live broadcast had already started to show the old devil's confession. He saw the old devil sitting in a chair, confessing his crimes with a sorrowful expression on his face. The old man looked at it for a long time, and the expression on his face turned a little complicated as he looked at Wang Ling. "Lingzi, do you know something?" Wang Ling lowered his head and didn't respond. Although he had been at the scene of the devil's capture, he had promised Immortal Toya and General Yi that he wouldn't say a word about what had happened there. The old man stared at the TV for a while. When he saw the old devil wiping his tears, he simply turned the TV off. "Her tears aren't good at acting." The old man clicked his tongue. As a chef, the old man had faced countless diners and seen all kinds of expressions. Like the old devil's, he could tell at a glance. There's a saying. The old man rubbed his chin in thought and finally came up with a comment that was very suitable for the old devil's mood at the moment. "You look like you're crying but you're cursing in your heart." Wang Ling. Sure enough, when Wang Ling returned to school today, the topic of discussion early in the morning was all about the live broadcast of the trial. In fact, when the old devil had been arrested, all the students of the 6 schools who had been in the military training had witnessed it. But apart from Wang Ling, who had been the closest to the scene, no one had clearly seen what had happened. From the perspective of most of the students at the time, they had only seen the magnificent and massive 5 elements great array. The light from the 5 elements great array was so dazzling, like the 5 spirit pearls sealing the demon lock pagoda, that people couldn't open their eyes. By the time they reacted, the old devil had already been arrested. Even when he had been arrested, the security at the scene had been surprisingly good, and a lot of curious students had wanted to see the true face of this legendary devil emperor, but had been stopped by the instructors. All in all, there had been a lot of regrettable things during the survival contest. So during the morning self-study period, someone recalled the specific details of that day through the live broadcast of the old devil's interrogation and felt that it was a pity. I wonder if there were any witnesses who were closer to the old devil when he was captured. I had no idea that the purpose of setting up the 5 elements great array was to capture the old devil. This was a confidential mission, of course we couldn't have known. Super Chin also sighed. And now that I think about it, it's very likely that we weren't allowed to bring our phones during the military training to prevent us from taking pictures at the scene of the arrest. Saying this, Super Chen had a mysterious look in his eyes. Actually, did you notice that a lot of mysterious things happened during the military training this time? Such as? Someone asked. During the military training, Dopey, classmate Wang Ling and I were in the same group, but at the start of the survival contest, Dopey had an upset stomach, so we were separated at the initial transmission stage. After that, I smoothly met up with classmate Wang Ling in the small world's desert. And then? That's the weird part. Super Chin frowned. I suddenly fainted halfway through. When I woke up, I found Loopy Toad and then classmate Wang Ling suddenly disappeared. I seriously suspect that I was kidnapped by some unknown creature in the small world. Everyone, Wang Ling. The reason why Super Chin felt that the survival contest this time was a little baffling was actually because of Wang Ling. Because after the contest, Wang Ling had followed Wang Ming's request and erased his memories of Wang Ming. That was why Super Chin felt that his memories of the survival contest had become a little baffling. Of course, this wasn't the most frightening thing because Wang Ling had made some mistakes when he had erased Wang Ming's memories. Although he had deleted Wang Ming's memories, there were still some details that he hadn't completely erased. He had forgotten to delete the no-show wave technique that Wang Ming had passed on to Super Chin and Dopey Gua at the time. Of course, neither Super Chin nor Dopey Gua had told anyone about this. At that moment, the expressions on their faces were a little crafty. After all, it was hard for normal people to understand this feeling of a sudden epiphany like a protagonist in a novel. Mom, your son has finally had an epiphany. So at that moment, Super Chen's mood was a little complicated. Apart from excitement, he was also indescribably touched. He looked at his hands in disbelief. Wang Ling saw that they were trembling slightly.